Yes, as you notice, we're back to our regularly scheduled book reading. We are back in. Let me get everything started formally before I start talking about the book itself. Welcome to Storytime with Sin. I'm your host, Sin, Sitar Ravenfeather. We will be reading today the book 3 of the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher called Grave Peril. Just a PSA ahead of time before we get started. All blurps, side alerts, etc., sound alerts will not work on this screen, so save your points and or biddies or whatever for afterward. We will be playing some Midnight Suns after this. Now, however, Twitch alerts does not conform to that same rule, so if you resub or what have you, I would like to please ask if you will hold off on the resubbing until after the story time is over to preserve continuity. I know it's a lot to ask, but and you know as well as and for anyone who has been a long time watcher listener of my content, you know that you don't have to sub, give biddies or anything to be here. Just as long as you just hang out and chill. This is a place to do that. So wherever you are in the world, feel free to wrap up in your favorite robe, blanket, cuddly things of some nature. Grab your nearest squishable. If you're living in a hot environment or warm environment, sit yourself down by a good strong fan and just pretend it's chilly. And let us begin at the beginning, shall we? Buckle up and listen in. Give me one sec. Oh, I don't break that. I actually take my glasses off for this, believe it or not. They're more detriment than a help. I did, however, put a light beside me, so I can actually have better light now that it's getting dark early. That's actually a good thing. Chapter 1. There are reasons I hate to drive fast. For one, the Blue Beetle, the mismatched Volkswagen bug that I putter around in, rattles and groans dangerously at anything above 60 miles an hour. For another, I don't get along so well with technology. Anything manufactured after about World War II seems to be susceptible to abrupt malfunction when I get close to it. As a rule, when I drive very carefully and sensibly. Tonight was an exception to the rule. The Beetle's tires screeched in protest as we rounded a corner clearly against the no left turn sign posted there. The old car growled gamely as though it sensed what was at stake, and continued its valiant puttering, moaning, and rattling as we zoomed down the street. "Can we go any faster?" Michael drawled. It wasn't a complaint, it was just a question calmly voiced. I need a voice for him, I haven't figured that out yet. "Only if the wind gets behind us or we start going down a hill," I said. "How far to the hospital?" The big man shrugged his shoulders and shook his head. He had that kind of salt and pepper hair, dark against silver, that some men seemed lucky enough to inherit, though his beard was still a solid color of dark brown to almost black. There were worry and laugh lines at the corners of his leathery face. His broad-lined hands rested on his knees, which were scrunched up due to the dashboard. "I don't know for certain," he answered me. 2 miles. I squinted out the Beetle's window in the fading light. "The sun's almost down. I hope we're not too late." "We're doing all we can," Michael assured me. "If God wills it, we will be there in time. Are you sure of your—" His mouth twisted in distaste. "Source?" "Bob is annoying but rarely wrong," I answered, jamming on the brakes and dodging around a garbage truck. "If he said the ghost would be there, it will be there." "Lord be with us," Michael said, and crossed himself. I felt a stirring of something, powerful, placid energy around him, the power of faith. "Harry, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about." "Don't ask me to Mass again," I told him, uncomfortable. "You know I'm just going to say no." Someone in a red Taurus cut me off, and I had to swerve around him into the turn lane, and then ahead of him again. A couple of the Beetle's wheels lifted off the ground. "Jerk," I howled out the driver's window. "That doesn't preclude asking," Michael asked. "But no, I wanted to know when you were going to marry Miss Rodriguez." "Hell's bells, Michael," I scowled. "You and I have been chasing all over town for the past 2 weeks, going up against every ghost and spirit that has all of a sudden reared its ugly head. We still don't know what's causing the spirit world to go postal." "I know that, Harry, but—" "At the moment," I interrupted, "we're going after a nasty old biddy at Cook County who could kill us if we aren't focused, and you're asking me about my love life." Michael frowned at me. You're sleeping with her, aren't you? He said. Not often enough, I growled. Dude, I can so feel that. And shifted lanes, swerving around a passenger bus. The night side. Do you love her? He asked. Michael, I said, give me a break. Where do you get off asking questions like that? Do you love her? He pressed. I'm trying to drive here. Harry, he asked, smiled, do you love the girl or not? Do you love the girl or don't you? It isn't a difficult question. Speaks the expert, I grumbled. I went past the blue and white about 20 miles an hour over the speed limit and saw the police officer behind the wheel blink and spill his coffee as he saw me go past. I checked my rearview mirror and saw the blue bulbs of the police car whir to life. Damn it, that tells us the cops are going to be coming in right after us. Don't worry about them, Michael assured me. Just answer the question. I flashed Michael a glance. He watched me, his face broad and honest, his jaw strong and his gray eyes flashing. His hair was cropped close, marine length on top, but he sported a short warrior's beard, which he kept clipped close to his face. I suppose so, I said after a second. Yeah. Then you don't mind saying it. Saying what? I stalled. Harry. Michael scolded, holding on as we bounced through a dip in the street. Don't be a child about this. If you love the woman, say so. Why? I demanded. If you haven't told her, have you? You've never said it. I glared at him. So what if I haven't? She knows. What's the big deal? Harry Dresden, he said, you of all people should know the power of words. Look, she knows, I said, tapping the brakes and then flattening the accelerator again. I got her a card. A card? Michael asked. A hallmark. Let me hear you say the words. What? Say the words, he demanded. If you love the woman, why can't you just say so? Now here's something that I take personally because this is how I roll myself. I don't just go around saying that to people, Michael. Stars and sky, that... I just couldn't, all right? You don't love her, Michael said. I see. You know that's not... Say it, Harry. If it will get you off my back, I said, and gave the beetle every ounce of gas that I could. I could see the police and traffic somewhere behind me. All right, I flashed Michael a ferocious, wizardly scowl and snarled. I love her. There, how's that? Michael beams. You see, that's the only thing that stands between you two. You're not the kind of person who says what they feel or who is very introspective. Harry, sometimes you just need to look in the mirror and see what's there. I don't like mirrors, I grumbled. Regardless, you need to realize that you do love the woman. After Elaine, I thought you might isolate yourself too much and never... I felt a sudden flash of anger and vehemence. I don't talk about Elaine, Michael. Ever. If you can't live with that, get the hell out of my car and let me work on my own. Michael frowned at me, probably more for my choice of words than anything else. I'm talking about Susan, Harry. If you love her, you should marry her. I'm a wizard. I don't have time to be married. I'm a knight, Michael responded, and I have the time. It's worth it. You're alone too much. It's starting to show. I scowled at him again. What does that mean? You're tense, grumpy, and you're isolating yourself more all the time. You need to keep up human contact, Harry. It would be so easy for you to start down a darker path. Michael, I snapped, I don't need a lecture. I don't need the conversion speech again. I don't need the cast aside your evil powers before they consume you speech again. What I need is for you to back me up while I go take care of this thing. Cook County Hospital loomed into sight, and I made an illegal U-turn to get the Blue Beetle up into the emergency entrance lane. Michael unbuckled his seatbelt even before the car had come to a stop and reached in the back to draw an enormous sword, fully 5 feet long in its flat scabbard. From the back seat, he exited the car and buckled on the sword. Then he reached back in for a white cloak with a red cross upon the left breast, which he tossed over his shoulders in a practiced motion. He clasped it with another cross, this one of silver, at his throat. It clashed with his flannel workman's shirt, blue jeans, and steel-toed work boots. Can't you leave the cloak off at least? I complained. I opened the door and unfolded myself in the Beetle's driver's seat, stretching my long legs and reaching the back seat to recover my own equipment, my new wizard staff and blasting rod, each of them freshly carved and still a green around the edges. Michael looked at me, wounded. The cloak is as much a part of me as of what I do as the sword, Harry. Besides, it's no more ridiculous than that coat you wear. I looked down at my black leather duster, the one with the large mantle that fell around my shoulders and spread out as it billowed in a most heavy and satisfactory fashion around my legs. My own black jeans and dark western shirt were a ton and a half more stylish than Michael's costume. What's wrong with it? It belongs on the set of El Dorado, Michael said. Are you ready? I shot him a withering glance, to which he turned the other cheek with a smile, and we headed toward the door. I could hear police sirens closing in behind us, maybe a block or two away. This is going to be close. Then we'd best hurry. He cast the white cloak back from his right arm and put his hand on the hilt of the great broadsword. Then he bowed his head, crossed himself, and murmured, Merciful Father, guide us and protect us as we go to do battle with the darkness. Once more there was that thrum of energy around him, like the vibrations of music heard through a thick wall. I shook my head and fetched a leather sack about the size of my palm from the pocket of my duster. I had to juggle staff, blast around the sack for a moment, and wound up with the staff in my left hand as was proper, the rod right in the sack dangling from my teeth. The sun is down, I grated out. Let's move it. And we broke into a run, night and wizard, through the emergency entrance of Cook County Hospital. We drew no small amount of stairs as we entered, my duster billowing out in a black cloud behind me, Michael's white cloak spreading like the wings of the avenging angel whose namesake he was. We pelted inside and slid to a halt at the first intersection of cool, sterile, bustling hallways. I grabbed the arm of the first orderly I saw. He blinked and then gawked at me from the tips of my western boots to the dark hair atop my head. He glanced at my staff and rod rather nervously and at the silver pentacle amulet dangling at my breast and gulped. Then he looked at Michael, tall and broad, his expression utterly serene, at odds with the white cloak and the broadsword at his hip. He took a nervous step back. May I help you? I speared him into place with my most ferocious, dark-eyed smile and said, between teeth clenched on the leather sack, Hi, could you tell us where the nursery is? Chapter 2. We took the fire stairs. Michael knows how technology reacts to me, and the last thing either of us wanted was to be trapped in a broken elevator while innocent lives were snuffed out. Michael led the way, one hand on the rail, one hand on the hilt of his sword, his legs turning steadily. I followed him, huffing and puffing. Michael paused by the door and looked back at me, white cloak swirling around his calves. It took me a couple seconds to come gasping up behind him. Ready? He asked me. I answered and nodded, still clenching my leather sack in my teeth, and fumbled a white candle from my duster pocket along with a box of matches. I had to set my rod and staff aside to light the candle. Michael wrinkled his nose at the smell of smoke and pushed open the door, candle in one hand, rod and staff in the other. I followed, my eyes flicking from my surroundings to the candle's flame and back. All I could see was more hospital. Clean walls, clean halls, lots of tile and fluorescent lights. The long luminescent tubes flickered feebly as though they had all gone stale at once, and the hall was only dimly lit. Long shadows stretched out from a wheelchair parked to the side of one door and gathered beneath a row of uncomfortable-looking plastic chairs at an intersection of hallways. The fourth floor was a graveyard, bottom of the well silent. There wasn't a flicker or sound from a television or radio, no intercom's buzz, no air conditioning word, nothing. We walked down a long hall, our steps sounding out clearly despite the effort to remain quiet. A sign on the wall, decorated with brightly colored plastic, clown read Nursery, Maternity, and pointed down another hall. I stepped past Michael and looked down that hallway. It ended at a pair of swinging doors. This hallway, too, was quiet. The nurse's station stood empty. The lights weren't just flickering here, they were altogether gone. It was entirely dark. Shadows and uncertain shapes loomed everywhere. I took a step forward past Michael, and as I did, the flame of my candle burned down to a cold, clear pinpoint of blue light. I spat the sack out of my mouth and fumbled it into my pocket. Michael, I said, and my voice strangled with hushed urgency, it's here. I turned my body so they could see the light. His eyes flicked down to the candle and then back up to the darkness beyond. Faith, Harry. Then he reached to his side with his broad right hand and slowly, silently drew Amaratius from its sheath. I found it a tad more encouraging than his words. The great blade's polished steel gave off a lambent glow as Michael stepped forward to stand beside me in the darkness, and the air fairly thrummed with its power. Michael's own faith amplified 1,000-fold. Where are the nurses? He asked me in a hoarse whisper. Spooked off, maybe? I answered as quietly. Or maybe some sort of glamour. At least they're out of the way. I glanced at the sword and at the long, slender spike of metal it set into its crossguard. Perhaps it was only my imagination, but I thought I could see flecks of red still upon it. Probably rust, I reasoned. Sure, rust. Yeah, that's a ticket. I set the candle down upon the floor where it continued to burn pinpoint clear, indicating a spiritual presence, a big one. Bob hadn't been lying when he said that the ghost of Agatha Hagglethorne was no two-bit shade. Stay back, I told Michael. Give me a minute. If what the spirit told you is correct, this creature is dangerous, Michael replied. Let me go first. It'll be safer. I nodded toward the glowing blade. Trust me, a ghost would feel the sword coming before you even got to the door. Let me see what I can do first. If I can dust the spook, this whole contest is over before it begins. I didn't wait for Michael to answer me. Instead, I took my blasting rod and staff in my left hand, and in my right I grasped the pouch. I untied the simple knot that held the sack closed and slipped forward into the dark. When I reached the swinging doors, I pressed one of them slowly open. I remained still for a long moment, listening. I heard singing, a woman's voice. Gentle, lovely. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. I glanced back at Michael and then slipped inside the door in total darkness. I couldn't see, but I'm not a wizard for nothing. I thought of the pentacle upon my breast over my heart, the silver amulet that I inherited from my mother. It was a battered piece of jewelry, scarred and dented from uses for which it was never intended, but I wore it still. The five-sided star within the circle was a symbol of my magic, of what I believed in, embodying the five forces of the universe working in harmony contained inside of human control. I focused on it and slid a little of my will into it, and the amulet began to glow with a gentle blue-silver light, which spread out before me in a subtle wave, showing me the shapes of a fallen chair and a pair of nurses at a desk behind the counter, slumped forward over their stations, breathing deeply. The soothing, quiet lullaby continued as I studied the nurses' enchanted sleep. It was nothing new. They were out, they weren't going anywhere, and there was little sense in wasting time or energy in trying to break the spell's hold on them. The gentle singing droned on, and I found myself reaching for the fallen chair, with the intention of sitting it upright so that I could have a comfortable place to sit down for a little rest. I froze, and I had to remind myself that I would be an idiot to sit down beneath the influence of the unearthly song for even a few moments. Subtle magic and strong, even knowing what to expect, I had barely sensed its touch in time. I skirted the chair and moved forward into a room filled with dressing hooks and little pastel hospital gowns hung up in the rows. The singing was louder here, though it still drifted around the room with a ghostly lack of origin. One wall was a little more than a sheet of plexiglass, and behind it was a room that attempted to look sterile and warm at the same time. Row upon row of little glass cribs on wheeled stands stood in the room, tiny occupants with toy-sized hospital mittens over their brand-new fingernails, and tiny hospital stocking caps over their bald heads were sleeping and dreaming infant dreams. Walking among them, visible in the glow of my wizard's light, was the source of the singing. Agatha Hagglethorne had not been old when she died. She wore a proper high-necked shirt, as was appropriate to a lady of her station in the 19th century Chicago, and a long, dark, nonsense skirt. I could see through her to the little crib behind her, but other than that she seemed solid, real. Her face was pretty in a strained, bony sort of way, and she had her right hand folded over the stump at the end of her left wrist. If that mockingbird don't sing, Mama's gonna buy you. She had a captivating singing voice, literally. She lilted out her song, spun energy into the air that lulled listeners into deeper and deeper sleep. If she was allowed to continue, she could draw both infants and nurses into a sleep from which they would never awaken, and the authorities would blame it on carbon monoxide, or something a little more comfortably normal than a hostile ghost. I crept closer, had enough ghost dust to pin down Agatha and a dozen spooks like her, and allow Michael to dispatch her swiftly, with a minimum of mess and fuss, just as long as I didn't miss. I hunkered down, kept the little sack of dust gripped loosely in my right hand, and slipped over to the door that led into the room full of sleeping babies. The ghost did not appear to have noticed me. Ghosts aren't terribly observant. I guess being dead gives you a whole different perspective on life. I entered the room, and Agatha Hagglethorne's voice rolled over me like a drug, making me blink and shudder. I had to keep focused, my thoughts on the cool power of my magic flowing through my pentacle and coming out in its spectral light. If that diamond ring don't shine. I licked my lips and watched the ghost as it stooped over one of the rolling cradles. She smiled, loving kindness in her eyes, and breathed out her song over a baby. The infant shuddered out a tiny breath, eyes closed in sleep, and did not inhale. Hush, little baby. Time had run out. In a perfect world, I would simply have dumped the dust onto the ghost, but it's not a perfect world. Ghosts don't have to play by the rules of reality, and until they acknowledge that you're there, it's tough, very, very tough, to affect them at all. Confrontation is the only way, and even then, knowing the shade's identity and speaking its name aloud is the only sure way to make it face you. Now this I can see to do. And better, most spirits just can't hear just anyone. It takes magic to make a direct call to the hereafter. I rose fully to my feet, bag gripped in my hand, and shouted, forcing my will into my voice, "Agatha Hagglethorne!" The spirit started as though a distant voice had come to her and turned toward me. Her eyes widened and song abruptly fell silent. "Who are you?" she said. "What are you doing in my nursery?" I struggled to keep the details Bob had told me about the ghost straight. "This isn't your nursery, Agatha Hagglethorne. It's more than 100 years since you died. You aren't real. You're a ghost and you're dead." The spirit drew itself up with a sort of cold, high society haughtiness. "I might have known. Benson sent you, didn't he? Benson is always doing something cruel and petty like this, then calling me a madwoman. A madwoman! He wants to take my child away." "Benson Hagglethorne is long dead, Agatha Hagglethorne," I responded, and gathered back my right hand to throw, "and as is your child, as are you. These little ones are not yours to sing or bear away." I steeled myself to throw, began to bring my arm forward. The spirit looked at me with an expression of lost, lonely confusion. This was the hard part about dealing with really substantial, dangerous ghosts. They were almost human. They appeared to be able to feel emotion, to have some degree of self-awareness. Ghosts aren't alive, not really. They're a footprint in the stone, a fossilized skeleton. They're shaped like the original, but they aren't it. But I'm a sucker for a lady in distress. I always have been. It's a weak point in my character, a streak of chivalry a mile wide and twice as deep. I saw the hurt and loneliness on the ghost Agatha's face and felt it strike a sympathetic chord in me. I let my arm go still again. Perhaps if I was lucky I could talk her away. Ghosts are like that. Confront them with the reality of their situation, then they dissolve. "I'm sorry, Agatha," I said, "but you aren't who you think you are. You're a ghost, a reflection. The true Agatha Hagglethorne died more than a century ago." "No," she said, her voice shaking. "That's not true." "It is true," I said. "She died on the same night as her husband and child." "No." The spirit moaned, her eyes closing. No. I don't want to hear this." She started singing to herself again, low and desperate. No enchantment to it this time, no unconscious act of destruction. But the infant girl still hadn't inhaled, her lips were turning blue. "Listen to me, Agatha," I said, forcing more of my will into my voice, lacing it with magic so the ghost could hear me. "I know about you. You died. You remember. Your husband beat you. You were terrified that he would beat your daughter, and when she started crying, you covered her mouth with your hand." I felt it like such a bastard to be going over the woman's past so coldly. Ghost or not, the pain on her face was real. "I didn't," Agatha wailed. "I didn't hurt her." "You didn't mean to hurt her," I said, drawing on the information Bob had provided. "But he was drunk and you were terrified, and when you looked down she was gone. Isn't that right?" I licked my lips and looked at the infant girl again. If I didn't get this done quickly, she'd die. It was eerie how still she was, like a little rubber doll. Some spark of memory caught a flame in the ghost's eyes. "I remember," she hissed. "The axe! The axe! The axe! The axe!" The proportions of the ghost's face changed, stretched, it became more bony, more slender. "I took my axe, and gave my Benson 20 whacks." The spirit grew, expanding, and a ghostly wind rustled through the room, emanating from the ghost and rife with the smell of iron and blood. "Oh, crap," I muttered and gathered myself to make a dash for the girl. "My angel gone!" she screamed. "The ghost, Benson gone! And then the hand that killed them both!" She lifted the stump of her arm into the air. "Gone! Gone! Gone!" She threw back her head and screamed, and it came out a deafening, bestial roar that rattled the nursery walls. I threw myself forward toward the breathless child, and as I did, the rest of the infants burst into terrified wails. I reached the child and smacked her little upturned baby butt. She blinked her eyes open in sudden shock, drew in her breath, and joined the rest of her nursery mates in crying. "No!" Agatha screamed. No! He'll hear you! He'll hear you!" The stump of her left arm flashed out toward me, and I felt the impact both against my body and against my soul, as though she had driven a chip of ice deep into my chest. The power of the blow flung me back against the wall like a toy, hard enough to send my staff and rod clattering to the floor. By some miracle or other, I kept a hold of my sack of ghost dust. But my head vibrated like a hammer struck. Bell and cold shivers racked my body in rapid succession. "Michael," I wheezed as loudly as I could, but I already could hear doors being thrown open, heavy work boots pounding toward me. I struggled to my feet and shook my head to clear it. The wind rose to a gale force, sending cribs skittering around the room on the little wheels, tearing at my eyes so that I had to shield them with one hand. Damn it, the dust would be useless in such a gale. Hush, little baby, hush, little baby, hush, little baby. Agatha's ghost bowed over the infant girl's cradle again and thrust the stump of her left arm down and into the mouth of the child, her translucent flesh passing seamlessly into the infant's skin. Oh, no, you don't. The child jerked and stopped breathing, though she still attempted to cry. I shouted a wordless challenge and charged the spirit. If I could not cast the dust upon her from across the room, I could thrust the leather bag into her ghostly flesh and pin her into place from within, agonizing, but undoubtedly effective. Agatha's head whipped toward me as I came, and she jerked away from the child with a snarl. Her hair had come free in the gale and spread about her face in ferocious mane, well suited to the feral features that had replaced her gentle expression. She drew back her left hand, and there suddenly appeared floating just above the stump a short, heavy-headed hatchet. She shrieked and brought the hatchet down at me. Ghostly steel chimed on true iron, and Amaratius's light flared bright white. Michael slid his feet into position on the floor, gritting his teeth with effort, and kept the spirit weapon from touching my flesh. "Dresden," he called, "the dust!" I fought my way forward through the wind, shoved my fist into Agatha's weapon arm, and shook loose some of the ghost dust from the leather sack. Upon contact with her immaterial flesh, the ghost dust flared into blazing motes of scarlet light. Agatha screamed and jerked back, but her arm remained in place as firmly as if it had been set in concrete. "Benson!" Agatha shrieked. "Benson! Hush, little baby!" And then she simply tore herself away from her arm at the shoulder, leaving her spirit flesh behind, and vanished. The arm and hatchet collapsed to the floor in a sudden spatter of clear, semi-fluid gelatin, the remnants of spirit flesh when the spirit was gone, ectoplasm that would swiftly evaporate. The gale died, though the lights continued to flicker. My blue-white wizard light and the lambent glow of Michael's sword were the only reliable sources of illumination in the room. My ears shrieked with the sudden lack of sound, though the dozen or so babies in their cribs continued a chorus of steady, terrified wails. "Are the children all right?" Michael asked. "Where did it go?" "I think so. The ghost must have crossed over, I guess. She knew she had it." Michael turned in a slow circle, sword still held at the ready. "It's gone, then?" I shook my head, scanning the room. "I don't think so," I responded, and bent over the crib of the infant girl who had nearly been smothered. The name on her wrist bracelet read Allison Ann Summers. I stroked her little cheek. She turned her mouth toward my finger, baby lips fastening on my fingertips, cries dying. Take your finger out of her mouth," Michael chided. "It's dirty. What happens now?" "I'll ward the room," I said, "and then we'll get out of here before the police show up." And Allison Ann jerked and stopped breathing. Her tiny arms and legs stiffened. I felt something cold pass over her, heard the distant drone of mad lullaby. "Hush, little baby." "Michael," I cried, "she's still here, the ghost. She's reaching here from the never-never." "Christ preserve," Michael swore. "Harry, we have to step over." My heart skipped a beat at the very thought. "No," I said. "No way. This is a big spook, Michael. I am not going to go onto her home ground naked and offer to go 2 out of 3. "We don't have a choice," Michael snapped. "Look." I looked. The infants were falling silent one by one, little cries abruptly smothered in mid-breath. "Hush, little baby." "Michael, she'll tear us apart, and if she doesn't, my godmother will." Michael shook his head, scowling. "No, by God, I won't let that happen." He turned his gaze on me, piercing. "And neither will you, Harry Dresden. There is too much good in your heart to let these children die." I returned to stare, uncertain. Michael had insisted I look him in the eyes on our first meeting. When a wizard looks you in the eyes, it's serious. He can see inside of you all of your dark secrets and hidden fears of your soul, and you see his in return. Michael's soul had made me weep. I wished that my soul would look like his had to me, but I was pretty damn sure it didn't. Silence fell. All the little babies hushed. I closed the sack of ghost dust and put it away in my pocket. It wouldn't do me any good in the never-never. I turned toward my fallen rod and staff, thrust out my hand, spat, "Ventus Servitus." The air stirred, and then flung staff and rod into my open hands before dying away again. "All right," I said. "I'm tearing open a window that will give us 5 minutes. Hopefully my godmother won't have time to find me. Anything beyond that, we're going to be dead already, or back here in my case." "You have a good heart, Harry Dresden," Michael said, a fierce grin stretching his mouth. He stepped closer to my side. "God will smile on this choice." "Yeah, well, ask him not to Sodom and Gomorrah my apartment, and we'll be even." Michael gave me a disappointed glance. I shot him a testy glare. He clamped a hand on my shoulder and held on. Then I reached out, caught hold of reality in my fingertips, and with the effort of will and I whispered, "Aparturum. Aparturum." I tore a hole between this world and the next. I take a drink. Let's see how long chapter 3 is, because it's insisting on doing a ad break. So I think, well, chapter 3 is not that long. I think I can do it in 5 minutes, I think. Chapter 3. Even days that culminate in a grand battle against an insane ghost and a trip across the border between this world and the spirit realm usually start out pretty normally. This one, for example, started off with breakfast and then work at the office. My office is in a building in midtown Chicago. It's an older building and not in the best of shape, especially since there was that problem with the elevator last year. I don't care what anyone says, that wasn't my fault. When a giant scorpion the size of an Irish wolfhound is tearing its way through the roof of your elevator, you get real willing to take desperate measures. Anyway, my office is small, one room, but on the corner with a couple of windows. The sign on the door reads simply, Harry Dresden, Wizard. Just inside the door is a table covered with pamphlets with titles like Magic and You and Why Witches Don't Sink Any Faster Than Anyone Else, A Wizard's Perspective. I wrote most of them. I think it's important for we practitioners of the art to keep up a good public image, anything to avoid another Inquisition. Behind the table is a sink, counter, and no coffee machine. My desk faces the door, and a couple of comfortable chairs sit across from it. The air conditioning rattles, the ceiling fan squeaks on every revolution, and the scent of coffee is soaked into the carpet and the walls. I shambled in, put coffee on, and sorted through the mail while the coffee percolated. A thank you letter from the Campbells for chasing the spook out of their house, junk mail, and thank goodness a check from the city for my last batch of work for the Chicago BD. That had been a nasty case all in all, demon summoning, human sacrifice, black magic, the works. I got my coffee and resolved to call Michael to offer to split my earnings with him, even though the legwork had been all mine. He and Amaratius had come in on the finale. I'd handled the sorcerer, he had dealt with the demon, and the good guys won the day. I'd turned in my logs, and at $50 an hour had netted myself a neat $2,000. Michael would refuse the money, he always did, but it seemed polite to make the offer, especially given how much time we'd been spending together recently, in an attempt to track down the source of all ghostly happenings in the city. The phone rang before I could pick it up to call Michael. Harry Dresden, I answered. Hello there, Mr. Dresden, said a warm feminine voice. I was wondering if I could have a moment of your time. I kicked back in my chair and felt a smile spreading over my face. Why, Miss Rodriguez, isn't it? Aren't you that nosy reporter from the Arcane, that useless rag that publishes stories about witches and ghosts and Bigfoot? Ah, plus Elvis, she assured me. Don't forget the king, and I'm syndicated now. Publications of questionable reputation all over the world carry my column. I laughed. How are you today? Susan's voice turned right. Well, my boyfriend stood me up last night, but other than that... I went still. Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. Look, Bob found a tip for me that just couldn't wait. Ahem, she said in her polite professional voice. I'm not calling to talk to you about my personal life, Mr. Dresden. This is a business call. I felt my smile returning. Susan was absolutely 1 in a million to put up with me. Oh, beg pardon, Miss Rodriguez. Pray continue. Well, I was thinking there was rumors of some more ghostly activity in the old town last night. I thought you might be willing to share a few details with your arcane. That might not be wholly professional of me. I keep my business confidential. Mr. Dresden, she said, I would assume not to resort to desperate measures. Why, Ms. Rodriguez, I grinned, are you a desperate woman? I could almost see the way she arched one eyebrow. Mr. Dresden, I don't want to threaten you, but you must understand that I'm well acquainted with a certain young lady of her company, and that I could see to it that things became very awkward between you. I see, but if I shared the story with you, it gave me exclusive, Mr. Dresden. An exclusive, I amended, that you might see your way clear to avoiding causing problems for me. I'd even put in a good word with her, Susan said, her voice cheerful, then dropping into a lower, smokier register. Who knows? You might get lucky. I thought about it for a minute. The ghost Michael and I had nailed last night had been a big bestial thing lurking in the basement of the University of Chicago library. I didn't have to mention the names of any people involved, and while the university wouldn't like it, I doubted it would be seriously hurt by appearing in a magazine that most people bought, along with every other tabloid in the supermarket checkout lines. Besides which, just the thought of Susan's caramel skin and soft dark hair under my hands. That's an offer I can hardly refuse, I told her. Do you have a pen? She did, and I spent the next 10 minutes telling her the details. She took them down with a number of sharp, concise questions and had this whole story out of me in less time than I would have believed. She really was a good reporter, I thought. It was almost a shame that she was spending her time reporting the supernatural, which people had been refusing to believe in for centuries. Thank you very much, Mr. Dresden, she said, after she squeezed the last strips of information out of me. I hope things go well with you, between you and the young lady tonight, at your place, at 9. Maybe the young lady would like to discuss the possibilities with me, I drawled. She let out a throaty laugh. Maybe she would. Susan agreed, but this is a business call. I laughed. You're terrible, Susan. You'd never give up, do you? Never, ever, she said. Would you really have been mad at me if I hadn't told you? Harry, she said, you stood me up last night without a word. I don't usually stand for that kind of treatment from any man. If you hadn't had a good story for me, I was going to think that you were out horsing around with your friends. Yeah, that Michael, I chuckled, he's a real party animal. You're going to have to give me the story on him sometime. Have you come any closer to working out what's going on with the ghost? Did you look into the seasonal angle? No and yes. I still can't figure out why the ghosts seem to be freaking out all at once, and we haven't been able to get any of them to hold still long enough for me to get a good look at them. I've got a new recipe to try out tonight. Maybe that'll do it, but Bob's sure it isn't a Halloween-y kind of problem. I mean, we didn't have any ghosts last year. No, we had werewolves. Different situation entirely, I said. I've got Bob working on overtime to keep it out in the spirit world for any more activity. If anything else is about to jump, we'll know it. All right, she said. She hesitated for a moment and then said, Harry, I waited, but when she stalled, I asked, what? I just want to be sure that you're all right. I had the distinct impression that she was going to say something else, but I didn't push. Tired, I said, a couple of bruises from slipping on some ectoplasm and falling into a card catalog, but I'm fine. She laughed. That creates a certain image tonight, then. I'm looking forward to it. She made the pleased little sound with more of a hint of sexuality in it, and let that be her goodbye. The day went fairly quickly with a bunch of the usual business. I whipped up a spell to find a lost wedding ring and turned down a customer who wanted me to put a love spell on his mistress. My ad in the Yellow Pages specifically reads, no love potions. But for some reason, people always think that their case is special. I went to the bank, referred a call to a private detective I knew, and met with a fledgling pyromancer in an attempt to teach him to stop igniting his cat accidentally. I was just closing down the office when I heard someone come out of the elevator and start walking down the hallway toward me. The steps were heavy as though from boots, and rushed. Mr. Dresden, asked the young woman's voice. Are you Harry Dresden? Yes, I said, locking the office door, but I'm just leaving. Maybe we can set up an appointment for tomorrow. The footsteps stopped a few feet away from me. Please, Mr. Dresden, I've got to talk to you. Only you can help me. I sighed without looking at her. She had said the exact words she needed in order to kick off my protective streak, but I could still walk away. Lots of people got to thinking that magic could dig them out of their troubles once they realized they couldn't escape. I'll be glad to, ma'am, first thing in the morning. I locked the door and started to turn away. Wait, she said. I felt her step closer to me, and she grabbed my hand. A tingling, writhing sensation shot up my wrist and over my elbow. My reaction was immediate and instinctive. I threw up a mental shield against the sensation, jerked my hand clear of her fingers, and took several steps back and away from the young woman. My hand and arm still tangled from the brushing against the energy of her aura. She was a slight girl with a black knit dress, black combat boots, and her hair dyed to a flat black mat. The lines of her face were soft and sweet, and her skin was pale as chalk around the eyes that were sunken, shadowed, and glaring with alley-cat wariness. I flexed my fingers and avoided meeting the girl's eyes for more than a fraction of a second. You're a practitioner, I said quietly. She bit her lip and looked away, nodding. And I need your help. They said you would help me. I give lessons to people who want to avoid hurting themselves with an uncontrolled talent, I said. Is that what you're after? No, Mr. Dresden, the girl said. Not exactly. Why me, then? What do you want? I want your protection. She lifted a shaking hand, fidgeting with her dark hair, and if I don't have it, I'm not sure if I'll make it through the night. And that's chapter 4. So I'm going to pause there for the ad break. I think a lot of it's already gone past, unfortunately. Yeah, I got about 30 minutes. 30 minutes, good Lord. 30 seconds left on the ad break. I'm just catching up on stuff. The scene, what's there to be seen? That's funny. Alright, ad break is back. We're back from the ad break. Let me take a pause for the calls right quick. Because I didn't have the whole ad break. I always have to take a slight break when the ad break pops up because that way it preserves my voice. We usually do about 10 chapters a reading, usually. We're on chapter 4. I led us both back into the office and flicked on the lights. The bulb blew out. It does that a lot. I sighed and shut the door behind us, leaving stripes of golden autumn light pouring through the blinds, interweaving with shadows on the floors and walls. I drew out a seat in front of my desk for the young woman. She blinked at me in confusion for a second before she said, "Oh," and sat. I walked around the desk, leaving my duster on, and sat down. "All right," I said. "If you want my protection, I want a few things from you first." She pushed back her asphalt-colored hair with one hand and gave me a look of pure calculation. Then she simply crossed her legs so that the cover of her dress left one pale leg bare mid-thigh. I am not reading some of this because that is just way too far. "Of course, Mr. Dresden, I'm sure we can do business." The look she gave me was direct, sensual, and willing. Oh, she was pretty enough, I suppose. Any adolescent male would have been drooling and hurling himself at her, but I'd seen a lot better. I rolled my eyes. "That's not what I meant." Her sex-kitten look faltered. "It isn't?" She frowned at me, her eyes scanning me again, reassessing me. Is it? Are you?" "No," I said. "I'm not gay, but I'm not buying what you're selling. You haven't even told me your name, but you're willing to spread your legs for me? No thanks. Hell's bells, haven't you even heard of AIDS or herpes?" Her face went white, and she pressed her lips together until they were white, too. "All right, then," she said. "What do you want from me?" "Answers," I told her, jabbing a finger at her. "And don't try lying to me. It won't do you any good." Which was only a marginal lie in itself. Being a wizard doesn't make you a walking lie detector, and I wasn't going to try a soul gaze on her to find out if she was sincere. It wasn't worth it. But another great thing about being a wizard is that people attribute just about anything you do to your vast and unknowable powers. Granted, it only works with those who know enough to believe in wizards, but not enough to understand our limits. The rest of the world, the regular people who think magic's just a joke, just look at you like someone is going to stuff you into a little white coat any second now. She licked her lips, a nervous gesture, not a sexy one. "All right," she said. "What do you want to know?" "Your name, for starters." She let out a harsh laugh. "You think I'm going to give you that, wizard?" "Points. Spell slingers like me could do an awful lot with a person's name given by their own lips." "All right, then. What do I call you?" She didn't bother to cover her leg again, a rather pretty leg, actually, with a tattoo of some kind encircling her ankle. I tried not to notice. "Lydia," she said. "Call me Lydia." "Okay, Lydia." "You're a practitioner of the art. Tell me about that." "It doesn't have anything to do with what I want from you, Mr. Dresden," she said. She swallowed and her anger faded. "Please, I need your help." All right, I said. "What kind of help do you need? If you're into some kind of gang-related trouble, I'm going to recommend you head for the police. I'm not a bodyguard." She shivered and hugged herself with her arms. "No, nothing like that. It's not my body I'm worried about." That made me frown. She closed her eyes and drew a breath. "I need a talisman," she said, "something to protect me from a hostile spirit." That made me sit up and take notice, metaphorically speaking. With the city flying into spiritual chaos as it was, I had no trouble believing that a girl gifted with magical talent might be experiencing some bad phenomena. Ghosts and spooks are drawn to the magically gifted. What kind of spirit? Her eyes shifted left and right, never looking at me. "I can't really say, Mr. Dresden. It's powerful and it wants to hurt me. They told me you could make something that would keep me safe." True, in point of fact, around my left wrist at that very moment was a talisman made from a dead man's shroud, blessed silver, and a number of other more difficult to come by ingredients. "Maybe," I told her. "That depends on why you're in danger and why you feel you need that protection." I can't tell you that," she said. Her pale face pinched into an expression of worry, real worry, the kind that makes you look older, uglier. The way she hugged herself made her look smaller, more frail. "Please, I just need your help." I sighed and rubbed at one eyebrow with my thumb. My first rampant instincts were to give her a cup of hot chocolate, put her blanket around her shoulders, tell her everything would be all right, and strap my talisman onto her wrist. I tried to rein those in, though. "Down, Quixote." I still knew nothing about her situation or what she needed protection from. For all I knew, she was trying to stave off an avenging angel coming after her in retribution for some act so vile that it stirred the powers that be to take immediate action. Even vanilla ghosts sometimes come back to haunt someone for a darn good reason. "Look, Lydia, I don't like to get involved in anything without knowing something about what's going on," which hadn't slowed me down before, I noted. "Unless you can tell me a little bit about your situation, convince me you're in legitimate need of protection, I won't be able to help you." She bowed her head, her asphalt hair falling across her face for a long minute. Then she drew in a breath and asked, "Do you know what Cassandra's tears is, Mr. Dresden?" "Prophetic condition," I said. "The person in question has random seizures, visions of the future, but they're always couched in terms of conditions that make explanation of the dreams seem unbelievable. Doctors mistake it for epilepsy in children sometimes and prescribe a bunch of different drugs for it. Pretty accurate prophecy as it goes, but no one ever buys into it. Some people call it a gift." I'm not one of them, she whispered. You don't know how horrible it is to see something about to happen and try to change it, only to have no one believe you. I studied her for a minute in silence, listening to the clock on my wall count down the seconds. All right, I said, you say that you have this gift. I guess you want me to believe that one of your visions warned you about an evil spirit coming after you. Not one, she said. Three. Three, Mr. Dresden. I only got one vision when they tried to kill the president. I got two for that disaster at NASA and for the earthquake in Laos. I never had three before, never had something appear so clearly. I closed my eyes to think about this. Again, my instincts told me to help the girl, smash the bad ghost or whatever, and walk off into the sunset. If she was indeed afflicted with Cassandra's tears, my actions could do more than save her life. My faith could change it for the better. On the other hand, I'd been played for a sucker before. This girl was obviously a competent actress. She had shifted smoothly into the willing seductress when she thought I'd been asking for sex and payment. That she would immediately make that conclusion based on my own fairly neutral statement that something about her all by itself said something about her all by itself. This wasn't a girl who was used to playing things fair and square. Unless I was grossly misreading her, she had bartered sex for goods and services before, and she was awfully young to be so jaded about the entire matter. The entire Cassandra's tears angle was a perfect scam, and people had used it before among the circles of the magically endowed. The story required no proof, no performance on the part of the person running the scam. All she would need would be a smidgen of talent to give her the right aura, maybe enough kinetomancy to tilt the dice a little on their way down. Then she could make up whatever story she wanted about her supposed prophetic gifts, put on a little girl lost act, and head straight for the local dummy, Harry Blackstone, Copperfield, Dresden. I opened my eyes to find her watching me. Of course, she said, I could be lying. Cassandra's tears can't be analyzed or observed. I could be using an excuse to provide a reasonable explanation why you should help a lady in distress. That's pretty much what was going through my mind, Lydia. Yeah, you could be a small-time witch who stirred up the wrong demon and is looking for a way out. She spread her hands. All I can tell you is that I'm not. I know that something's coming. I don't know what, and I don't know why or how. I just know that what I see. Which is fire, she whispered. Wind. I see dark things in a dark war. I see my death coming for me out of the spirit world, and I see you at the middle of it all. You're the beginning and the end of it. You're the one who can make the path go different ways. That's your vision? Iowa has less corn. She turned her face away. I see what I see. Standard Carney procedure. Flatter the ego of the mark. Draw him in, get him good and hooked, and fleece him for everything he's got. Sheesh, I thought. Someone else trying to get something out of me. My reputation must be growing. Still, there was no sense in being rude. Look, Lydia, I think maybe you're just overreacting here. Why don't we meet again in a couple of days and we'll see if you still think you need my help? She didn't answer me. Her shoulders just slumped forward and her face went slack with defeat. She closed her eyes and I felt a nagging sensation of doubt tug at me. I had the uncomfortable impression that she wasn't acting. All right, she said softly. I'm sorry to have kept you late. She got up and started walking toward the door of my office. My better judgment propelled me up and out of my chair and across the room. We reached the door at the same time. Wait a minute. I said, I unbound the talisman from my arm, feeling the pop of energy as the knot came undone. Then I took her left wrist and turned her hand over to tie the talisman onto her. There were pale scars on her arm, the vertical kind that run along the big veins, the ones you get when you're really serious about killing yourself. They were old and faded. She must have gotten them when she was, 10 years old? Younger? I shuddered and secured the little braid of musty cloth and silver chain about her wrist, willing enough energy into it to close the circle once the knot was tied. When I finished, I touched her forearm lightly. I could just feel the talisman's power, a tingling sensation that hovered a half an inch over her skin. Faith magic works best against spirits, I said quietly. If you're worried, get to a church. Spirits are strongest just after the sun goes down around the witching hour, and again just before the sun comes up. Go to the St. Mary of the Angels. It's a church at the corner of Bloomingdale and Wood down by Wicker Park. It's huge. You can't miss it. Go around the delivery door and ring the bell. Talk to your father, Forthill. Tell him that Michael's friend said that you need a safe place to stay for a while. She only stared at me, her mouth open. Tears formed in her eyes. You believe me, she said. You believe me. I shrugged, uncomfortable. Maybe, maybe not, but things have been bad the past few weeks, and I'd rather not have you on my conscience. You better hurry. It's going to be sundown soon. I pressed some bills into her hand and said, Take a cab. St. Mary of the Angels. Father Forthill. Michael's friend sent you. Thank you, she said. Oh, God, thank you, Mr. Dresden. She seized my hand in both hers and pressed the tear-stained kiss to my knuckles. Her fingers were cold and her lips too hot. Then she vanished out the door. I shut it behind her, shook my head. Harry, you idiot. You're one decent talisman that would protect you against ghosts, and you just gave it away. She's probably a plant. They probably sent her to you just to get the talisman off you so they can eat you up the next time you go spoil their fun. I glared down at my hand where the warmth of Lydia's kiss and dampness of her tears still lingered. Then I sighed, and I walked to the cabinet where I kept 50 or 60 spare light bulbs on hand and replaced the one that had burned out. The phone rang. I got down off my chair and answered it sourly. Dresden. There was silence and scratchy static on the other end of the line. Dresden, I repeated. The silence stretched on, and something about it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There was a quality to it that was difficult to describe, like something waiting, gloating. The static grew louder, and I thought I could hear voices underneath it, voices speaking in low, cruel tones. I glanced at the door of the departed Lydia. Who is this? Soon, whispered a voice. Soon, Dresden, we will see one another again. Who is this? I repeated, feeling a little silly. The line went dead. I stared at the phone before hanging it up, and then ran my hand back through my hair. A chill crawled neatly down my spine, took up residence somewhere a little lower than my stomach. All right, then, I said, my own voice a little too loud in the office. Thank God that wasn't too creepy or anything. The antique radio on the shelf beside the coffee machine hissed and squalled to life and almost jumped out of my shoes. I whirled to face it in a fury, hands clenched. Harry, said a voice on the radio. Harry, is this thing on? Is this thing working? I tried to calm my pounding heart and focus enough will on the radio to let my voice carry through. Yeah, Bob, it's me. Thank the stars, Bob said. You said you wanted to know how I found out. You said you wanted to know if I found out anything else ghostly going on. Yeah, go ahead. The radio hissed and crackled with static, spiritual interference, not physical. The radio wasn't set up to receive AM/FM anymore. Bob's voice was garbled, but I can understand it. My contacts come through Cook County Hospital tonight. Someone stirred up Agatha Hagglethorne. This is a bad one, Harry. She's a mean old biddy. Bob gave me the rundown on Agatha Hagglethorne's grisly and tragic death and her most likely target at the hospital. I glanced down at my bare left wrist and abruptly felt naked. All right, I said, I'm on it. Thanks, Bob. The radio squalled and went silent, and I dashed out the door. Sundown would come less than 20 minutes. Rush hour had been going on for a while now, and if I wasn't at Cook County by the time it got dark, all kinds of bad things would happen. I flew out the door with the psychic ghost dust heavy in my pocket and all but slammed into Michael, tall and broad, toting a huge athletic bag over his shoulder, which I knew would contain nothing but amarachus and his white cloak. Michael, I burst out, how'd you get here? His honest face split into a wide smile. When there is a need, he sees to it that I am there. Wow, I said, you're kidding. No, he said, his voice earnest, then he paused. Of course, you've gotten in touch with me every night for the past 2 weeks, and I just thought I'd save him the trouble of arranging coincidence, so I came on over as soon as I got off work. He fell into step beside me and both got into the Blue Beetle. He got in the red door and I got in the white one, and we peered out over the gray hoods as I pulled the OVW into traffic. And that's how we ended up doing battle in the nursery at Cook County. Anyway, you see what I mean about the day being fairly normal before it falls to pieces? Or, well, maybe it hadn't been all that normal. As we took off into traffic and I gave the Beetle all the gas it could, I got that sinking feeling that my life was about to get hectic again. I'll pause again, taking a drink. Nom. Let me take a look here right quick. I'm just peering ahead here. Okay. That's going to be really good. Okay. Alright. Back again, sorry. One more thing before I get started again. Okay. Chapter 5. Michael and I plunged through the hole I'd torn in reality and into the never-never. It felt like moving from a sauna into an air-conditioned office, except I didn't feel the change on my skin. I felt it in my thoughts and my feelings and the primitive skin-crawling part of me. At the base of my brain, I stood in a different world than our own. The little leather sack of ghost dust in my duster pocket abruptly increased its weight, dragging me off balance into the ground. I let out a curse. The whole point of the ghost dust was that it was something extra real, and that was heavy and inert and locked spiritual matter into place when it touched it. Even inside its bag, it had become a sudden stress on the never-never. If I opened the bag here in the world of spirit, it might tear a hole in the floor. I'd have to be careful. I grunted with effort and pulled the little pouch out of my pocket. It felt like it weighed 30 or 40 pounds. Michael frowned down at my hands. You know, I never really thought to ask before, but what is that dust made of? Depleted uranium, I told him. At least that's the base ingredient. I had to add a lot of things. Cold iron, basil, dung from it. Never mind, he said. I don't want to know. He turned away from me, his arm steadily holding the massive sword before him. I recovered staff and rod and stood beside him, studying the lay of the as it were land. This part of the Never Never looked like Chicago at the end of the 19th century. No strike that. This was the ghost Demoscene. I never have been able to say that word correctly. It looked like a mishmash of Agatha Hagglethorne's memories of Chicago at the end of her life. Edison's bulbs were mounted on some of the street lights, while others burned with flickering glass flames. All of them cast hazy spheres of light, doing little to actually illuminate their surroundings. The buildings stood at slightly odd angles to one another, with parts of them seamlessly missing. Everything, streets, sidewalks, buildings, was made of wood. Hell's bells, I muttered. No wonder the real Chicago kept burning down. This place is a tinderbox. Rats moved in the shadows, but the street was otherwise empty and still. The rift that led back to our world wavered and shifted. Fluorescent light and sterile hospital air pouring onto the old Chicago streets. Around us pulsed maybe a dozen shimmering disturbances in the air, the rich life forces of the infants back in the infirmary showing into the Never Never. Where is she? Michael asked, his voice quiet. Where's the ghost? I turned in a slow circle, peering at the shadows, and shook my head. I don't know, but we better find her fast, and we need to get a look at this one if we can. Out to try to find out what's gotten it stirred up, Michael said. Exactly. I don't know about you, but I'm getting a little tired chasing all over town every night. Didn't you already get a good look at her? Not the right kind of look, I said with a grimace. There could be spells laid on or some kind of magic around here to clue me in on what's going on. I need not to be in mortal peril for a couple minutes to examine her. Provided she doesn't kill us first, all right? Michael assented, but time is short. I don't see her anywhere. What should we do? I hate to say it, I said, but I think we should. I was going to say split up, but I didn't get the chance. The heavy wooden timbers of the roadway beneath us exploded up and out in a deadly cloud of splinters. I threw one leather-clad arm across my eyes and went tumbling one way. Michael went the other. My little angels! Mine! 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 Screamed a voice that roared against my face and chest and made my duster flap around as though made of gauze. I looked up to see the ghost, quite real and solid now, clawing its one-armed way up from the sub-street. Agatha's face was lean and bony, twisted in rage, and her hair hung about her in a shaggy mane, sharply at odds with her crisp white shirt. Her arm was missing from its shoulder, and dark fluid stained the cloth beneath it. Michael rose to his feet with a shout, one of his cheeks cut and bleeding, and went after her with Amaratius. The spirit backhanded him away with the remaining arm as though he weighed no more than a doll. Michael grunted, went flying, rolling along the wooden street. And then, snarling and drooling, her eyes widened with frenzied madness, the ghost turned toward me. I scrambled to my feet and held out my staff across my body, a slender barrier between me and the ghost on its home turf. I guess it's too late to have a reasonable discussion, Agatha. My babies, the spirit screamed. Mine, mine, mine. Yeah, that's what I thought, I breathed. I gathered my forces and started channeling them through the staff. The pale wood began glowing with a gold and orange light spreading out, forming a quarter dome shape. The ghost screamed again and hurtled toward me. I stood fast and shouted, Reflect him! At the top of my lungs. The spirit impacted against my shield with all the momentum of a bull rhinoceros on steroids. I've stopped bullets and worse with that shield before, but that was on my home turf in the real world. Here, the Never Never, Agatha's ghost overloaded my shield, which detonated into a thunderous roar and set me sprawling to the ground. Again. I jammed my scorched staff into the ground and groaned to my feet. Blood staining my tingling fingers, the skin swelling with dark bruises and burst blood vessels. Agatha stood several paces away, shaking with rage, or if I was lucky with confusion. Bits of my shield fire played over her shape and slowly winked out. I fumbled for my blasting rod, but my fingers had gone numb, and I dropped it. I bent over to pick it up, swayed, and stood up again, red mist and sparkling dots swimming through my vision. Michael circled the stunned spirit and arrived at my side. His expression was concerned rather than frightened. Easy, Harry, easy. Good Lord, man, are you all right? I'll make it, I croaked. There's good news and bad news. The knight brought his sword to guard again. I've always been partial to the good news. I don't think she's interested in those babies anymore. Michael flashed me a swift smile. That is good news. I wiped some sweat from my eyes. My hand came away scarlet. I must have gotten cut somewhere along the way. The bad news is that she's going to come over here and tear us apart in a couple more seconds. Not to be negative, but I'm afraid the news gets worse, Michael said. Listen. I glanced at him and cocked my head to one side distantly, but quickly growing nearer. I could hear haunting, musical baying, ghostly in the midnight air. Holy shit, I breathed. Hellhounds. Harry, Michael said sternly, you know I hate it when you swear. You're right. Sorry. Holy shit, I breathed. Heckhounds. Godmother's out hunting. How the hell did she find us so damn fast? Michael grimaced at me. She must have been close already. How long before she gets here? Not long. My shield made a lot of noise when it buckled. She'll home in on it. If you want to go, Harry, Michael said, and go on and leave, I'll hold the ghost till you can get back through the rift. I was tempted. There aren't a lot of things that scare me more than the Never Never and my godmother in tandem. But I was also angry. I hate it when I get shown up. Besides, Michael was a friend, and I'm not in the habit of leaving friends to clean up my mess for me. No, I said, let's just hurry. Michael grinned at me and started forward just as Agatha's ghost extinguished the last residual bits of my magic that had been plaguing it. Michael sent Amaratius whistling at the ghost, but she was unthinkably swift and dodged each blow with a circling, swooping sort of grace. I lifted my blasting rod and narrowed my focus. I tuned out the baying of the hellhounds, now a lot nearer, and the sound of galloping hoofbeats that sent my pulse racing. I methodically blanked out everything but the ghost, Michael, and the power funneling through the blasting rod. The ghost must have sensed the strike gathering, because she turned and flew at me like a bullet, her mouth open in a scream, and I could see jagged pointed teeth lying in her jaws, the empty white fire of her eyes. Fuego! I shouted, and the spirit hit me full force. A beam of white fire spewed it from my blasting rod and across the wooden storefronts. They burst into flame as though soaked in gasoline. I went down rolling, and the spirit going after my throat with her teeth. I jammed the end of the blasting rod into her mouth and prepared to fire again, but she tore it from my hands with a ferocious dog-like whirring motion, and it tumbled away. I swiped the shaft at her awkwardly with no avail. She whipped from my throat again. I shoved a leather-clad forearm in her mouth and shouted, Michael! The ghost ripped at me with her nails and clamped down on my forearm. I dropped the ghost dust and scrabbled furiously at her with my free hand, trying to lever her off of me, but didn't do much more than muss up her clothing. She got her hand on my throat, and I felt my breath cut off. I writhed and struggled to escape, but the snarling ghost was a lot stronger and faster than me. Stars swam in front of my eyes. Michael shouted and swept Amaratius at the spirit. The great blade bit into her back with a wooden-sounding thunk, and made her arc up, screaming in pain. It was a death blow. The white light of the blade touched her spirit flesh and set it alight, sizzling away from the edges of the wound. She twisted, screaming in fury, and the motion jerked the blade from Michael's hands. Agatha Hagglethorne's blazing ghost prepared to fly at his throat. I sat up, seized the sack of ghost dust, and with a grunt of effort swept it at the back of her head. There was a sharp sound when improvised Kosh struck her, the super-heavy matter I'd enchanted hitting like a sledgehammer on china. The ghost froze in place for a moment, her feral mouth wide, and then toppled slowly to one side. I looked up at Michael, who stood gasping for breath, staring at me. Harry, he said, do you see? I lifted a hand to my aching throat and looked around me. The sounds of baying hands and thundering hooves had gone. See what? I asked. Look. He pointed at the smoldering ghost corpse. I looked. In my struggles with Agatha's ghost, I had torn aside the prim white shirt, and she must have ripped up the dress when she'd been crashing through the sidewalks and strangling wizards and so on. I crawled a bit closer to the corpse. It was burning, not blazing, but steadily being eaten away by Amaratius' white fire, like newsprint slowly curling into flame. The fire didn't hide what Michael was talking about. Wire. Strands of barbed wire ran about the ghost's flesh beneath the torn clothing. The barbs had dug cruelly into her flesh every 2 inches or so, and her body was covered with small, agonizing wounds. I grimaced, picking away at the burning cloth in tentative jerks. The wire was a single strand that began at her throat, wrapped around her torso, beneath her arms, winding all the way down to one leg to her ankle. At either end, the wire simply vanished into her flesh. Suns and stars, I breathed. No wonder she went mad. The wire, Michael asked, crouching down next to me. It was hurting the ghost? I nodded. It looks like torturing it. Why didn't we see this at the hospital? I shook my head. Whatever this is, I'm not sure it would be visible in the real world. I don't think we would have seen it if we hadn't come here. God smiled on us, Michael said. I had my own injuries and then glowered at the bruises already spreading over Michael's arm and throat. Yeah, whatever. Look, Michael, this kind of thing doesn't just happen. Someone had to do it to this ghost. Which implies, Michael said, they had a reason to want this ghost to hurt those children. His face darkened to a scowl. Whether or not that was their goal, what it implies is that someone is behind all the recent activity, not something or condition. Someone is purposely doing this to the ghosts in the area. I stood up and brushed myself off as the corpse continued to burn like the buildings around us. Fire raged up the sides of anything vertical and began to chew its way across the streets and sidewalks as well. A haze of smoke filled the air as the spirit's demoscene and the Never Never crumbled along with its remains. Ow, I complained. I keep my complaints succinct. Michael took the handle of his sword and drew it out of the flames, shaking his head. The city is burning. Thank you, Sir Obvious. He smiled. Can the flames hurt us? Yes, I said. Emphatic. Time to go. Together we headed back to the rift at a quick trot. At one point, Michael shouldered me out of the way of a tumbling chimney, and we had to skirt around a pile of shattered bricks and blazing timbers. "Wait," I said suddenly. "Wait, do you hear that?" Michael kept me hustling over the ground toward the rift. "Hear what? I don't hear anything." "Yeah," I coughed. "No more hounds howling." A very tall, slender, inhumanly beautiful woman stepped out of the smoke. Reddish hair curled down past her hips in a riotous cascade, complementing her flawless skin, high cheekbones, and lush, full, blood-red lips. Her face was ageless, and her golden eyes had vertical slits instead of pupils like a cat. Her gown was a flowing affair of deep green. "Hello, my son," Leah purred, evidently unaffected by the smoke and unconcerned about the fire. Three great shapes like mastiffs, built from shadows and soot, crouched about her feet, watching us flat black eyes. They stood between us and the rift that led back home. I swallowed and forced down a sudden feeling of childlike panic that started gibbering down in my belly and threatened to come dancing up out of my throat. I stepped forward between the fairy and Michael and said in a rough voice, "Hello, godmother." Chapter 6. My godmother looked around at the inferno and smiled. "It reminds me of times gone by. Doesn't it remind you, my sweet?" She idly reached down and stroked the head of one of the hounds at her side. "However did you find me so quickly, godmother?" I asked. She gave the hellhound a benign smile. I have my secrets, sweet. I only wanted to greet my long-estranged godson." "All right, hi, good to see you. Have to do it again sometime," I said. Smoke curled up to my mouth and I started coughing. "We're kind of in a hurry here, so..." Leah laughed and sounded like bells just a shade out of tune. "Always in a rush, you mortals. But we haven't seen each other in ages, Harry." She walked closer, her body moving with the lithe, sensuous grace that might have been mesmerizing in other circumstances. The hound spread out silently behind her. "We should spend some time together." Michael lifted his sword again and said calmly, "Madam, step from our path, if you will please." "It does not please me." She spat sudden and vicious. Those rich lips peeled back from dainty, sharp canines, and at the same time three shadowy hands let out bubbling growls. Her golden eyes swept past Michael and back to me. "He is mine, Sir Knight. By blood right, by law, and by his own broken word, he has made a compact with me. You have no power over that." "Harry," Michael shot me a quick look. "Is what she say true?" Give me one moment, guys. I need to pause for a second. Forgive the interruption. I had to see what River was needing. She was, I guess she was alerted by some noise outside. Let us continue. I apologize again. I licked my lips and gripped my staff. I was a lot younger then and a lot more stupid. "Harry, if you made a covenant with her of your own free will, then she's right. There's little I can do to stop her." Another building fell with a roar. The fires gathered around us, and it grew hot, really, really hot. The rift wavered and growing smaller. We didn't have much time left. "Come, Harry," Leah purred, her voice gone, pardon the pun, smoky again. "Let the good knight of the white god pass on his way, and let me take you to waters that will soothe your hurts and balm your ills." It sounded like a good idea. It sounded really good. Her own magic saw to that. I felt my feet moving toward her in a slow, leaden shuffling. Dresden? Michael said sharply. Good Lord, man, what are you doing? Go home, Michael, I said. My voice came out thick, dull as though I'd been drinking. I saw Leah's mouth, her soft, lovely mouth, curl upward in a triumphant smirk. I didn't try to fight the pull of the magic. I wouldn't have been able to stop my legs in any case. Leah had my number for years, and as far as I could tell, she always would. I hadn't a prayer of taking control back for more than a few seconds. The air grew cooler as I got closer to her, and I could smell her body, her hair, like wildflowers, and musky earth intoxicating. There isn't much time before the rift closes. Go home. Harry! Michael shouted. Leah placed one long-fingered, slender hand upon my cheek. A wash of tingling pleasure went through me. My body reacted to her, helpless and demanding at the same time, and I had to fight to keep thoughts of her beauty from preoccupying me altogether. Yes, my sweet man, Leah whispered, golden eyes bright with glee. Sweet, sweet, sweet. Now lay aside your rod and staff. I watched dully as my fingers released both. They clattered to the ground. The flames grew closer, but I didn't feel them. The rift glowed and shrank, almost closed. I narrowed my eyes, gathering my will. Will you complete your bargain now, sweet mortal child? Leah murmured, sliding her hands over my chest and then over my shoulders. I will go with you, I answered, letting my voice come out thick, slow. Her eyes lit with malicious glee, and she threw her head back and laughed, revealing creamy, delicious expanses of throat and bosom. When hell freezes over, I added, and drew out the little sack of ghost dust for the last time. I dumped it all over and down the previously mentioned bosom. There isn't much lore about fairies and depleted uranium yet, but there is a ton of about fairies and cold iron. They don't like it, and the iron content of the dust formula was pretty high. Leah's flawless complexion immediately split into a fiery scarlet welts, the skin drying and cracking before my eyes. Leah's triumphant laugh turned into an agonized scream, and she released me, tearing her silken gown away from her chest in a panic. Really more gorgeous flesh was being riven by the cold iron. Michael, I shouted, now! I gave my godmother a stiff shove, scooped up my staff and run and dove for the rift. I heard her snarl, and something fastened around one of my boots, dragging me to the ground. I thrust my staff down at one of the hellhounds, and the wood struck it in one of its eyes. It roared in its rage, and its two packmates came rushing toward me. Michael stepped in the way and swept his sword at one of them. The true iron struck the fairy beast, and blood and white fire erupted from the wound. The second one leapt upon Michael and fastened its fangs onto his thigh, ripping and jerking. I brought my staff down hard on the beast's skull, driving it off Michael's leg, and started dragging my friend back toward the swiftly vanishing line of the rift. More hellhounds appeared, brushing from the burning ruins around us. Come on, I shouted. There's no time. Treacher! Spat my godmother. She rose up from the ground, blackened and burned, her fine dress in tatters about her waist, her body and limbs stretched, knobby and inhuman. She had clenched her hands into fists at her side, and the fire from the building around us seemed to rush down, gathering in her grasp a pair of blazing points of violent emerald light. Treasonous, poisonous child! You are mine as your mother swore unto me, as you swore. You shouldn't make contracts with a minor, I shouted back, and shoved Michael forward into the rift. He wavered for a moment on the narrow opening, fell through, and vanished back into the real world. If you will not give me your life, serpent child, then I will have your blood. Leah took 2 huge strides toward me and hurled both hands forward. A thunderbolt of braided emerald and violet power rushed at my face. I hurled myself backwards at the rift and prayed that it was still open enough to let me fall through. I extended my staff toward my godmother and threw up whatever weak shield I could. The fairy fire hammered into the shield, hurling me back into the rift like a straw before a tornado. I felt my staff smolder and burst into flames in my hand as I went sailing through. I landed on the floor of the nursery back in Cook County Hospital, my leather duster trailing with it a shroud of smoke, and swiftly converted itself into a thin, disgusting coating of residual ectoplasm, while my staff burned with a weird green and purple fire. Babies in the low glass cribs screamed lustily all around me. Confused voices babbled from the next room. Then the rift closed, and we were left back in the real world, surrounded by crying babies. The fluorescent lights all came back up, and we could hear the more worried words from the nurses back to the duty station. I beat out the fires with my staff, and then sat back there panting and hurting. None of the matter of the never may have come back into the real world, but the injuries gained there were very real. Michael got up and looked around at the babies, making sure they were all in satisfactory condition. Then he sat down next to me, wiped the patina of ectoplasm from his brow, and started pressing the material of his cloak against the oozing gashes in his leg, where the hellhound's fangs had sunk in through his jeans. He gave me a pensive, frowning stare. What? I asked him. Your godmother. You got away from her, he said. I laughed weakly. This time, yeah, so what's bothering you? You lied to her to do it. I tricked her, I countered. Classic tactics with fairies. He blinked and then used another section of his cloak to clean the ectogook off Armoratius. I just thought you were an honest man, Harry, he said, expression injured. I can't believe you lied to her. I started to laugh weakly, too exhausted to move. You can't believe I lied to her. Well, no, he said, his voice defensive. That's not the way we're supposed to win. We're the good guys, Harry. I laughed some more and wiped a trickle of blood off my face. Well, we are. Some kind of alarm started going off. One of the nurses stepped into the observation room and took one look at the pair of us and ran out screaming. You know what bothers me? I asked. What's that? I set my scorched staff and rod aside. I'm wondering how in the world my godmother happened to be right at hand when I stepped through into the Never Never. It isn't like the place is a small neighborhood. I wasn't there 5 minutes before she showed up. Michael sheathed his sword and set it carefully aside out of easy arm's reach, then unfastened his cloak, wincing. Yes, it seems like an unlikely coincidence. We both put our hands up on top of our heads as the Chicago PD patrolman, his jacket and pants stained with spilled coffee, burst from the nursery, gun drawn. We both sat there with our hands on our head and did our best to look friendly and non-threatening. Don't worry, Michael said quietly. Just let me do the talking. I'm going to take a drink. I always take a drink between chapters. Chapter 7. Michael rested his chin in his hands and sighed. I can't believe we're in jail. Let me do the talking, he said. Disturbing the peace, I snorted, pacing the confines of the holding cell. Trespass. They'd have seen disturbed peace if we hadn't shown up. I jerked a fistful of citations out of my pants pocket. Look at this. Speeding, failure to obey traffic signs, dangerous and reckless operation of a motor vehicle, and here's the best one. Illegal parking. I'm going to lose my license. You can't blame them, Harry. It isn't as though we could explain what happened to them in terms they would understand. I kicked at the bars in frustration. Pain lanced up my leg, and I immediately regretted it. They had taken my boots away when I'd been put through processing. Added to my aching ribs, the wounds on my head and my stiffening fingers, it was too much. I sat down on the bench next to Michael and with a woof of expelled breath. I get so sick of that, I said. People like you and me stand up things that these jokers, I made an all-encompassing gesture, would never even dream existed. We don't get paid for it. We hardly even get thanked for it. Michael's tone was unruffled, philosophical. It's the nature of the beast, Harry. I don't mind it so much. I just hate it when something like this happens. I stood up frustrated again and started pacing the interior of the cell. What really galls me is that we still don't know why the spirit world's been so jumpy. This is big, Michael. If we don't pin down what's causing it, who's causing it? Right. Who's causing it? Who knows what could happen? Michael half smiled. The Lord will never give you a burden bigger than your shoulders can bear, Harry. All we can do is face what comes and have faith. I gave him a sour glance. I need to get myself some bigger shoulders, and someone in accounting must have made a mistake. Michael let out a rough, warm laugh and shook his head, then lay back on the bench, crossing his arms beneath his head. We did what was right. Isn't that enough? I thought of all those babies snuffling and making cute, piteous little sounds as the nurses had rushed about, gathering them up and making sure that they were all right, carrying them off to their mommies. One, a fat little Gerber candidate, had simply let out an enormous burp and promptly fell asleep on the nurse's shoulder. About a dozen little lives, all told, with an open future laid out before them. A future that would have abruptly ended if I hadn't acted. I felt a stupid little smile playing at the corners of my mouth and a very small, very concrete sense of satisfaction that my indignation hadn't managed to erase. I turned away from Michael so that he wouldn't see the smile and forced myself to sound resigned. Is it enough? I guess it's going to have to be. Michael laughed again. I flashed him a scowl and only drew more merry laughter, so I gave up trying and just leaned against the bars. How long before we get out of here, do you think? I've never been bailed out of jail before, Michael said. You'd be a better judge. Hey, I protested. What's that supposed to mean? Michael's smile faded. Charity, he predicted, is not going to be very happy. I winced. Michael's wife. Yeah, well, all we do is face what comes and have faith, right? Michael grunted, somehow making it right. I'll say a prayer to St. Jude. I leaned my head against the bars and closed my eyes. I ached in places I didn't know could ache. I could have dozed off right there. All I wanted, I said, is to get home, get clean, and go to sleep. That sounds like that stuff I feel like when I have to work. An hour or so later, a uniformed officer appeared and opened the door, informing us that we'd made bail. I got a sickly little feel in my stomach. Michael and I shuffled out of the holding area into the adjacent waiting room. A woman in a roomy dress and a heavy cardigan stood waiting for us, her arms folded over her 7th or 8th month of pregnancy. She was tall, with gorgeous silken blonde hair that fell to her waist in a shining curtain, timelessly lovely features, and dark eyes smoldering with contained anger. Michael Joseph Patrick Carpenter, she snapped and stalked toward us. Well, actually, she waddled, but the set of her shoulders and her determined expression made it seem like a stalk. You're a mess. This is what comes of taking up with bad company. Hello, Angel, Michael rumbled and leaned over to give a woman a kiss on the cheek. She accepted with the loving tolerance of a Komodo dragon. Don't you hello, Angel me. Do you know what I had to go through to find a babysitter to get all the way out here, get the money together, and get the sword back for you? Hi, Charity, I said brightly. Good, gee, it's good to see you too. It's been, what, 3 or 4 years since we've talked? 5 years, Mr. Dresden, the woman said, shooting me a glare. And the good Lord willing, it'll be 5 more before I have to put up your idiocy again. But she thrust her swollen stomach at me like a ram on a Greek warship. Every time you come nosing around, you get Michael in some sort of trouble. And now into jail, what will the children think? Look, Charity, it was really important. Mrs. Carpenter, she snorted. It's always really important, Mr. Dresden. Well, my husband has engaged in many important activities without what I dubiously term your help. But it's only when you're around here it seems to come back to me covered in blood. Hey, I protested. I got hurt too. Good, she said. Maybe it'll make you more cautious in the future. I scowled down at the woman. I'll have you know, she grabbed the front of my shirt and dragged my face down to hers. She was surprisingly strong. She could glare right at me without looking me square in the eyes. I'll have you know, she said, her voice steely, that if you ever get my Michael into trouble so deep that he can't come home to his family, I will make you sorry for it. Tears that had nothing to do with weakness made her eyes bright for a moment. She shook with emotion. I have to admit, at that particular moment, her threat scared me, waddling pregnancy and all. She finally released me and turned back to her husband, gently touching the dark scab on his face. Michael put his arms around her. With a little cry, she hugged him back, burying her face against his chest and weeping without making any sound. Michael held her very carefully, as if he were afraid of breaking her, and stroked her hair. I stood there for a second like a floundering goob. Michael looked up at me and met my gaze for a moment. Then he then turned, keeping his wife under one arm, and started walking away. I watched the two of them for a moment, walking a step beside one another while I stood there alone. Then I stuck my hands in my pockets and turned away. I hadn't ever noticed before how well the two of them matched one another. Michael with his quiet strength and unfailing reliability, and Charity with her blazing passion and unshakable loyalty to her husband. The married thing. Sometimes I look at it and feel like someone from a Dickens novel standing outside in the cold and staring in at Christmas dinner. Relationships had never really worked for me. I think it's had something to do with all the demons, ghosts, and human sacrifice. As I stood there brooding, I sensed her presence before I smelled her perfume, a warmth and energy about her that I'd grown to know of the time we'd been together. Susan paused at the door of the waiting room, looking back over her shoulder. I studied her. I never got tired of that. Susan had dark skin, tanned even darker from her previous weekend at the beach, and raven black hair cut off neatly at her shoulders. She was slender, but curved enough to draw an admiring look from the officer behind the counter. She stood there in a flirty little skirt and half-top which let her midriff bare. My phone call caught her just as she was leaving for our rendezvous. She turned to me and smiled, her chocolate-colored eyes worried but warm. She tilted her head back toward the hallway behind her where Michael and Charity had gone. They're a beautiful couple, aren't they? I tried to smile back, but didn't do so well. They got off to a good start. Susan's eyes studied my face, the cuts there, and worry in her eyes deepened. Oh, how's that? He rescued her from a fire-breathing dragon. I walked toward her. Sounds nice, she said, and met me halfway, giving me a long and gentle hug that made my bruised ribs ache. You okay? I'll be okay. More ghost busting with Michael? What's his story? Off the record, publicity could hurt him. He's got kids. Susan frowned and nodded. All right, she said, and added third melodrama to her words. So, what is he? Some kind of eternal soldier? Maybe a sleeping Arthurian knight, woken in this desperate age to battle the forces of evil? As far as I know, he's a carpenter. Susan arched her brow at me. Who fights ghosts? What, has he got a magic nail gun or something? I tried not to smile. The muscles at the corners of my mouth ached. Not quite. He's a righteous man. He seemed nice enough to me. No, not self-righteous. Righteous. The real deal. He's honest, loyal, faithful. He lives his ideals. It gives him power. Susan frowned. He looked average enough. I'd expected, I'm not sure, a different attitude. That's because he's humble, too, I said. If you asked him if he was righteous, he'd laugh at the idea. I guess that's part of it. I've never met anyone like him. He's a good man. She pursed her lips. And the sword? Amaratius, I supplied. He named his sword. How very Freudian of him. But his wife just about reached down that clerk's throat to get it back. It's important to him, I said. He believes that it is one of the 3 weapons given by God to mankind. 3 swords. Each of them has a nail that is supposed to be from the cross worked into its design. Only one of the righteous can wield them. The ones who do call themselves the Knights of the Cross, others call them the Knights of the Sword. Susan frowned. The cross, she said, is in the crucifixion, capital C? I shrugged uncomfortably. How should I know? Michael believes it. That kind of belief is power of its own. Maybe that's enough. I took a breath and changed the subject. Anyway, my car got impounded. I had to drive fast, and CPD didn't like it. Her dark eyes sparkled. Anything worth a story? I laughed tiredly. Don't you ever give up? A girl's got to earn a living, she said, and fell into step beside me on the way out, slipping her arm through mine. Maybe tomorrow. I just want to get back home and get some sleep. No date, I guess? She smiled up at me, but I could see the expression was strained around the edges. Sorry, I know, she sighed. I shortened my steps a little, and she lengthened hers, though neither of us moved quickly. I know what you're doing is important, Harry. I just wish sometimes that... She broke off, frowning. That what? Nothing. It's really selfish. That what? I repeated. I found her hand with my bruised fingers and squeezed gently. She sighed and stopped in the hall, turning to face me. She took both of my hands and didn't look up when she said, I just wish that I could be that important to you, too. An uncomfortable pang hit me in the middle of my sternum. Ow. It hurt to hear that, literally. Susan, I stammered, hey, don't ever think that you're not important to me. Oh, she said, still not looking up. It's not that. Like I said, just selfish. I'll get over it. I just don't want you to feel like... I frowned and took a breath. I don't want you to think that I don't... What I mean to say is that... Love you. That should have been simple enough to say, but the words stuck hard in my throat. I never said them to anyone I didn't lose. And every time I told my mouth to make the sounds, something shut down somewhere along the way. Susan looked up at me, her eyes flickering over my face. She reached up a hand and touched the bandage on my forehead. Her fingers light, gentle, and warm. Silence fell heavily in the hallway. I just stood there staring stupidly at her. Finally, I leaned down and kissed her hard, like I was trying to push the words out of my useless mouth and into her. I don't know if she understood, but she melted to me, all warm, soft tension, smelling of cinnamon and sweetness of her lips, soft and plant beneath mine. One of my hands drifted to the small of her back, to the smooth, rounded ridges of muscle on either side of her spine, drew her against me a little harder. Footsteps coming from the other direction made us both smile and break away from the kiss. A female officer walked by, her lips twisted into a knowing little smirk, and I felt my cheeks flush. Susan took my hand from her back, bending her mouth to put a gentle kiss on my bruised fingers. Don't think you're getting off that easy, Harry Dresden, she said. I'm going to get you to start talking if it kills you. But she didn't press the issue, and together we reclaimed all my stuff and left. I fell asleep on the drive back to my apartment, but I woke up when the car crunched into the gravel parking lot beside the stone stairs leading down to my lair in the basement of an old boarding house. We got out of the car and I stretched, looking around at the summer night with a scowl. What's wrong? Susan asked. Mister, I said, he's usually running right up to me when I come home. I let him out early this morning. He's a cat, Harry, Susan said, flashing me a smile. Maybe he's got a date. What if he got hit by a car? What if a dog got to him? Susan let out a laugh and walked over to me. My libido noted the sway of her hips and the little skirt with an interest that made my aching muscles cringe. He's as big as a horse, Harry. I pity the dog that tries something. I reached back into the car for my staff and rod and then slipped my arm around her. Susan's warmth beside me, the scent of cinnamon drifting up to me from her hair, felt incredibly nice at the end of a long day, but it just didn't feel right to not have Mr. run up to me and bowl into my shins in greeting. That should have been enough to tip me off. I'll plead weariness, achiness, and sexual distraction. It came as a total shock to me to feel a wave of cold energy rise into my face in tandem with a shadowy form. Rising up from the steps leading down to my apartment, I froze and took a step back, only to see another silent shape step around the edge of the boarding house and start walking toward us. Gooseflesh erupted down my arms. Susan caught on a second or two after my whispered senses that gave me warning. Harry, she breathed, what is it? Who are they? Take it easy and get out your car keys, I said as the two shapes approached us, the waves of cool energy increasing as they did, light from the distant street lamp reflected in the nearest figure's eyes, gleaming huge and black. We're getting out of here. These are vampires. Chapter 8. One of the vampires let out a velvet laugh and stepped out into the dim light. He wasn't particularly tall, and he moved with a casual and dangerous grace that belied his crystal blue eyes, the style blonde hair and tennis whites he wore. Bianca told us you'd be nervous, he purred. The second of the pair kept cornering toward us from the corner of the boarding house. She, too, was of innocuous height and build, and possessed the same blue eyes and flawless golden hair as the man. She, too, was dressed in tennis whites, but, she breathed and licked hers with a cat-quick tongue, she didn't tell us you'd smell so delicious. Susan fumbled with her keys, pressed up against me, tight with tension and fear. Harry, don't look them in the eyes, I said. Don't let them lick you. Susan shot me a sharp look from beneath raven brows. Lick? Yeah, this saliva's got some kind of addictive narcotic. We reached her car. Get in. The male vampire opened his mouth, showing his fangs, and laughed. Peace, wizard. We're not here for your blood. Speak for yourself, the girl said, and she licked her lips again, and this time I could see the black spots on her long pink tongue. Ugh. The male smiled and put a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that was half affection, half physical restraint. My sister hasn't eaten tonight, he explained. She's on a diet. Vampires on a diet? Susan murmured under her breath. Yeah, I said back, sort of voce. That make hers a blood lake. But Susan made a choking sound. I eyed the male and raised my voice. Who are you then, and why are you at my house? He inclined his head politely. My name is Kyle Hamilton. This is my sister Kelly. We're associates of Madame Bianca's, and we're here to give you a message, an invitation, actually. It only takes one of you to deliver a message. Kyle glanced at his sister. We're just on our way to our game of doubles. I snorted. Yeah, right, I told him. Whatever it is you're selling, I don't want any. You can go now. Kyle frowned. I urge you to reconsider, Mr. Dresden. You, of all people, should know Madame Bianca is the most influential vampire in the city of Chicago. Denying her invitation could have grave consequences. I don't like threats. I shot back. I hefted my blasting rod and leveled at Kai's baby blues. Keep it up, and there's going to be a greasy spot right about where you're standing. The pair of them smiled at me, innocent angels with pointed teeth. Please, Mr. Dresden, Kyle said. Understand that I am only pointing out the potential hazards of a diplomatic incident between the Vampire Court and the White Council. Whoops, that changed things. I hesitated and then lowered the blasting rod. This is court business? Official business? The Vampire Court, Kyle said in measured cadence to his words, extends a formal invitation to Harry Dresden, Wizard, as the local representative of the White Council of Wizards, to attend the reception celebrating the elevation of Bianca St. Clair to the rank of Margraine of the Vampire Court 3 nights hence, reception to begin at midnight. Kyle paused to produce an expensive-looking white envelope and to refresh his smile. The safety of all invited guests is assured by word of the assembled court, of course. Harry, Susan breathed. What's going on? Tell you in a minute, I said. I stepped away from Susan. You're acting as an ordained herald of the court, then? I am, Kyle said. I nodded. Bring me the invitation. The pair of them started toward me. I lifted my blasting rod and muttered a word. Power flooded through the rod, and the far tip began to glow with an incandescent light. Not her, I said, nodding at the herald's sister. Just you. Kyle kept his smile, but his eyes exchanged from blue to a shade of angry black that was rapidly expanding to cover the whites. Well, he said, his voice tense, aren't we the little lawyer, Mr. Dresden? I smiled back at him. Look, Sparky, you're the herald. You should know that the courts as well as I do. You've license to deliver and receive messages and to have safe passage granted to you so long as you don't start any trouble. I waved the tip of the rod toward the girl beside him. She doesn't. She's not obliged to keep the peace either, so let's just say I'd rather we all walked away from this. They both made a hissing sound that no human could quite have duplicated. Kyle pushed Kelly roughly back behind him where she remained, her soft-looking hands pressed to her stomach, her eyes flooded entirely black and empty of humanity. Kyle stalked toward me and thrust the envelope at me. I swallowed my fear, lowered my blasting rod, and took it. Your business here is complete, I told him. Blow. You'd better be there, Dresden, Kyle snarled, pacing back to his sister's side. My lady will be most upset if you're not. I told you to blow, Kyle. I lifted my hand, gathered my anger and my fear as handy sources of fuel, and said quietly, Ventus Servatus. Energy flowed out of me. Wind roared up in response to my command and whipped out toward the pair of vampires, carrying a cloud of dust and dirt and debris with it. They both staggered, lifting a hand to shield their eyes against flame particles. As the wind faded, I sighed, wearied by the efforts of moving that much air, and watched the vampires gather their wits and blink their eyes clear. Their perfect tennis whites were stained, their beautiful complexions were mussed, and best of all, their flawless hair was standing up every which way. They hissed at me and crouched, bodies oddly balanced and held within a human lightness. Then there was a blur of tennis whites, and they were gone. I didn't assume they had left until I let my senses drift out from me, tasting the air for the cold energy that had surrounded them. It had faded as well, only then, when I was absolutely sure they were gone, did I relax. Well, it felt like simple relaxing. Generally, when I relax, I don't stagger and need to plant my staff firmly on the ground to keep from falling over. I stood there like that for a second, my head swimming. Wow, Susan came toward me, her face concerned. Harry, you sure know how to make friends. I wobbled a little, hardly able to stand. I don't need friends like that. She got close enough to me to lean on. I spared my ego by slipping underneath my arm as though for my protection. Are you all right? Tired. I've been working too hard tonight. Must have gotten out of shape. Can you walk? I gave her a smile that probably looked strained and started walking toward the stairs leading down to my apartment. Mr. My gray cat came flying over the ground from the darkness somewhere and threw himself fondly against my legs. 30 pounds of cat is a lot of fondness. And I had to have Susan's help to keep from falling over. Eating small children again, mister? My cat meowed and then padded down the stairs and pawed at the door. So, Susan said, the vampires are throwing a party. I fished my keys out of my duster and unlocked the door to the old place, and Mr. bolted inside. I shut the door behind us and stared weirdly at my living room. The fire had died down to glowing embers, but still shed red golden light over everything. I decorated my apartment in textures, not colors in any case. I liked the smooth grain of old woods, the heavy tapes Tapestries on the bare stone walls, the chairs are all thickly padded and comfortable looking, and rugs are strewn over the bare stone floor in a variety of materials, patterns, and weaves from Arabian to Navajo. Susan helped me hobble until I could collapse on my plushy cushion couch. She took my staff and blasting rod from me, wrinkling her nose at the charred smell, and set them in the corner next to my cane sword. Then she came back over to me and knelt down, flashing a lot of bare pretty legs. She took my boots off, and I groaned as my feet came free. "Thanks," I said. She plucked the envelope from my hand. "Could you get the candles?" I groaned for an answer, and she sniffed. "Big baby, you just want to see me walk around in this skirt." "Guilty," I said. She quirked a smile at me and then went to the fireplace. She added a few logs to it from the old tin hod, and then stirred the embers with a poker until licks of flame came up. I don't have any electric lights in my apartment. Gadgets go out so often that there's no point in constantly replacing them. My refrigerator is an old-style ice box, the kind with ice. I shuddered to think what I could do to gas lines. So I live without heat except for my fireplace, and without hot water, without electricity. The curse of a wizard. It saves on the utility bills, I have to admit, but it can be damned inconvenient. Looks like we're about to have an ad break. Susan had to bend down far over the frame to thrust a long candlestick tip into the small flames. The orange light curved around the lean muscles of her legs in a fashion I found positively fascinating, even as wearied as I was. Susan rose with a lighted candle in her hand, cast a smirk at me. "You're staring, Harry." "Guilty," I said again. She lit several candles on the mantel from the first, and then opened the white envelope, frowning. "Wow," she said, and held the invitation inside up to the light. I couldn't make out the words, but they had that white yellow glint that you only get from true gold. "The bearers of Harry Dresden and an escort of his choosing are hereby courteously invited to a reception." I didn't think they used invitations like this anymore. Vampires, they can be a couple 100 years out of style and not notice. "Harry," Susan said. She flicked the invitation against the heel of her hand a couple times. "You know, something occurs to me." My brain tried to stir from its congealment. Some instinct twitched me, warning me that Susan was up to something. I said, blinking my eyes in an effort to clear my thoughts. "I hope you're not thinking what a great opportunity it would be for you to go to the ball." Her eyes glinted with something very much like lust. "Think of it, Harry. There could be beings there for hundreds of years old. I could get enough stories from half an hour chat to last me." "Hang on, Cinderella," I said. "In the first place, I'm not going to the ball. And second, if I was, I wouldn't take you with me." All right, we've got an ad break for about 2 to 3 minutes. I'm going to take a quick just a pause for the cows. Give me 1 second. Alright, I am back. Sorry about that. Had to stop for the ad break, so you know. Alright, back to the action. Her back straight and she put one fist on her hip. And just what's that supposed to mean? I winced. Look, Susan, they're vampires. They eat people. You've got no idea how dangerous it would be for me there. Or for you, for that matter. What about what Kyle said? The guarantee of your safety. Talk is cheap, I said. Look, everyone in the old circles is big on the old laws of courtesy and hospitality, but you can only trust them to adhere to the letter of the law. If I happened to get served a bad batch of mushrooms or someone drove by and filled the whole place with bullets and I was the only mortal there, they'd just say, oh my, what a terrible shame. So sorry, really, it won't happen again. So you're saying they'd kill you, Susan said. Bianca has a grudge against me, I said. She couldn't just sneak up on me and tear my throat out, but she could arrange for something to happen to me more indirectly. It's probably what she has in mind. Susan frowned. I've seen you handle things a lot worse than those two out there. I let out a breath in exasperation. Maybe, sure, but what's the point in taking chances? Can't you see what this might mean to me? She said. Harry, that footage I shot of the werewolf. Loup-garou, I interrupted. Whatever. It was 10 seconds of footage that was only aired for 3 days before it vanished, and it put me further ahead than 5 years of legwork. If I could publish actual interviews with vampires, sheesh, Susan, you're reading too much off the bestseller list. In the real world, the vampire eats you before you get to hit the record button. I've taken chances before, so have you. I don't go looking for trouble, I said. Her eyes flashed. Damn it, Harry, how long have I been putting aside things that happened to you, like tonight, when I was supposed to be spending the evening with my boyfriend and instead I'm bailing him out of jail? Ouch. I glanced down. Susan, believe me, if I could have done anything else, this could be a fantastic opportunity for me. She was right, and she had bailed me out of trouble often enough before that maybe I owed her that opportunity, dangerous as though it may be. She was a big girl and she could make her own choices, but damn it, I couldn't just nod my head and smile and let her walk into that kind of danger. Better to sidetrack her. No, I said. I've got enough problems without pissing off the White Council again. Her eyes narrowed. What's this White Council? Kyle talked to you as though it was some kind of ruling body. Is that like the vampire court only for wizards? Exactly like that, I thought. Susan hadn't gone as far as she had by being stupid. Not really, I told her. You're a horrible liar, Harry. The White Council is a group of the most powerful men and women in the world, Susan. Wizards. Their big currency is secrets, and they don't like people knowing about them. Her eyes gleamed like a hound on a fresh scent. And you're some kind of ambassador for them? I had to laugh at the notion. Oh, God, no, but I'm a member. It's sort of like having a black belt. It's a mark of status, of respect with the council. It means that I get to vote when issues come up, and then I have to abide by their rules. Are you entitled to represent them at functions like this? I didn't like the direction this conversation was headed. Obligated to, really, in this case. So if you don't show up, you'll be in trouble. I scowled. Not as much trouble as I'll be in if I go. The worst the council would be able to accuse me of is being impolite. I can live with that. And if you do show up, come on, Harry, what's the worst that could happen? I threw up my hands. I could get myself killed. Or worse, Susan, you really don't understand what you're asking of me. I pushed myself up on the couch to go to her. Bad idea. My head swam, my vision blurred. I would have fallen, but Susan dropped the invitation and caught me. She eased me back down to the couch, and I kept my arm around her, drawing her down with me. She felt soft and warm. We lay there for a minute. She rubbed her cheek against against the duster's leather creaked. I heard her sigh. I'm sorry, Harry. I shouldn't have hit you with this right now. It's all right, I said. I just think that's something big. I turned a little, tangled my fingers in the dark softness of her hair and kissed her. Her eyelids opened wide for a second, then lowered. Her words broke off into a low growling sound, and her mouth softened beneath mine, warm and getting warmer. In spite of my aches and bruises, the kiss felt good. It felt really good. Her mouth tasted nice, the softness of her lips mobile and eager beneath mine. I felt her slide a few fingers in between buttons of my shirt, caressing the skin there. An electric sensation thrilled through me. I faltered in surprise for half a second when I realized she wasn't wearing anything underneath, but then we'd been playing on an evening in. A spasm of need and hunger pounded through all the exhaustion. I clutched her, felt her gasp again, willing and hungry as me, her body tensing against me beneath my hands. She started jerking at my belt, gasping, her breath hot in my face. Harry, you jerk, don't you think this is going to distract me forever? Shortly after that, we made sure that neither of us could think of anything at all, and fell asleep a goodly while after that, tangled together in a sprawl of exhausted limbs, dark hair, and soft blankets in front of the fire. All right, so the entire day wasn't a living hell. But as it turned out, hell got up awfully early in the morning. I skipped some of that because, well, curtain closed and time passed, as it were. Chapter 9. I dreamed. The nightmare felt familiar, almost comfortable, though it had been years since I'd gone through it. It began in a cave, its walls made of translucent crystal, all but glowing in the dim light of the fire beneath the cauldron. The silver manacles were tied on my wrists, and I was too dizzy to keep my own balance. I looked to the left and right and watched my blood glide down over the manacles from where they'd pierced my wrists like thorns. then fall into a pair of earthen bowls set out beneath them. My godmother came to me, pale and breathtaking in the firelight, her hair spilling down like a cloud of silk. The she-lady was beautiful and beyond the pale of mortals, her eyes bewitching, her mouth more tempting than most luscious fruit. She kissed my bare chest. Shudders of cold pleasure ran through me. "Soon," she whispered between kisses, "only a few more nights of the dark moon, my sweetling, and you will be strong enough." She kept kissing me, and I began to lose my vision. Cold pleasure, fairy magic coursed through her lips like a drug, so sweet that it almost agony of its own, and made the torment of the bonds, the blood loss, almost worthwhile. Almost. I felt myself gasping for breath and stared at the fire, focusing on it, trying to keep from falling into the darkness. The dream changed. I dreamt of fire. Someone I had once loved like a father stood in the middle of it, screaming in agony. There were black screams, horrible screams, high-pitched, and utterly without pride or dignity or humanity. In the dream, as in life, I forced myself to watch flesh blacken and flake away from sizzling muscle and baking bone. Watched muscles contract in tortured spasms while I stood over the fire, metaphorically speaking, and blew on the coals. "Justin," I whispered. In the end, I couldn't watch any longer. I closed my eyes and bowed my head, listening to the thunder of my own heart pounding in my ears, pounding, my heart pounding. I came out of the dream, blinked open my eyes. My door rattled on its frame under a series of hammering blows. Susan woke up at the same time, sitting up, the blanket we had been curled under gliding down over the curves of her breasts. It was still dark outside. The longest candle had yet burned away, but the fire was down to embers again. My body ached all over, the day after ache of tired joints and muscles demanding time to recuperate. I rose as the pounding went on and went to my kitchen drawer. My .38 had been lost in the battle with the gang of half-mad lycanthropes the year before, and I had replaced it with a medium-barrel .357. I must have been feeling insecure that day or something. The gun weighed about 2,000 pounds in my hand. I made sure it was loaded and turned to face the door. Susan pushed her hair over her eyes, blinked at my gun, and backed away, making damn sure she was out of my line of fire. Smart girl, Susan. "You're not going to have much luck breaking down that door," I called out. I didn't point the gun at the door yet. Never point a gun at anything you're not sure you want dead. "I replaced the original one with a steel door and a steel frame. Demons, you know." The pounding ceased. "Dresden," called from the other side of the door. "I tried to reach you on the phone, but it must be off the hook. We've got to talk." I frowned, put the gun back in the drawer. Okay. Sheesh, Michael. Do you know what time it is?" "Time to work," he answered. "The sun will be up shortly." "Lunatic," I mumbled. Susan looked around at the remains of our clothing, scattered pretty much everywhere, and sprawl of blankets and pillows and cushions all over the floor. "I think maybe I'll just wait in your room," she said. "Right, okay." I opened the kitchen closet and got my heavy robe out, the one I usually save for working in the lab, and slipped into it. "Stay covered up, all right? I don't want you to get sick." She gave me a sleepy half-smile and rose, all long limbs and grace and interesting tan lines, and vanished into my little bedroom and shut the door. I walked across the room and opened the door for Michael. He stood there in blue jeans, a flannel shirt, and fleece-lined denim jacket. He had his big gym bag slung over his shoulder, and Amaratius was a silent tension I could just barely feel within it. I looked from the bag to his face and asked, "Trouble?" "Could be. Did you send someone to Father Forthill last night?" I rubbed my eyes, trying to get the sleep out of them. "Coffee. I needed coffee or a Coke, just as long as there was caffeine somewhere." "Yes, a girl named Lydia. She was worried that a ghost was after her. He called me this morning. Something spent the night trying to get into the church." I blinked at him. "What, did it get inside?" He shook his head. He didn't have time to tell me much. "Can you come down there with me and take a look around?" I nodded and stepped back from the door. "Give me a couple minutes." I head for the icebox and get out a can of Coke. My fingers worked enough to open it. At least, though they still felt stiff. My stomach reminded me that I'd been ignoring it, and I got out the plate of cold cuts while I was there. I swigged the Coke and made myself a big sandwich. I looked up a minute later to see Michael eyeing the destruction that had been the living room. He nudged one of Susan's shoes with his foot and glanced up at me apologetically. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was here." "It's okay." Michael smiled briefly, then nodded. "Well, do I need to lecture you on sexual involvement before marriage?" "It's okay." I growled something about early morning inconvenient visitors and toads. Michael only shook his head, smiling while I wolfed down food. "Did you tell her?" "Tell her what?" He lifted an eyebrow at me. I rolled my eyes. "Almost." "You almost told her." "Sure. Got distracted." Michael nudged Susan's other shoe with his foot and let out a delicate cough. "So I see." I finished the sandwich and part of the Coke, and then walked across the room, slipped into the bedroom. The room was freezing, and I could see Susan curled into a ball beneath heavy blankets on my bed. Mister had lain down with his back against hers and watched me with sleepy, self-satisfied eyes as I came in. "Rub it in, fuzzball," I growled at him, and dressed quickly. Socks, jeans, t-shirt, heavy flannel work shirt over that. Mom's amulet around my neck, a little silver charm bracelet with a half a dozen shields dangling off of it, fixed to my left wrist in place of the charm I'd given Lydia. A plain silver ring, interior surface inscribed with a number of runes, went on my right hand. Both pieces of jewelry tingled with the enchantments I'd laid on them, still fairly fresh. I leaned over the bed and kissed Susan's cheek. She made a sleepy murmuring sound, snuggled a little deeper beneath the covers. I thought about getting under there with her and making sure she was nice and warm before leaving, but instead went out, shutting the door carefully behind me. Michael and I left, piling into his truck, a white, of course, Ford pickup with the extra wheels and enough hauling power to move mountains, and headed for St. Mary of the Angels. St. Mary of the Angels is a big church. I mean a big church. It's been looming over the Wicker Park area for more than 80 years and has seen the neighborhood grow up from a collection of cheap homes for immigrants mixed in with rich folks' mansions to little Bohemia today, packed with yuppies and artisties and success stories and wannabes. The church, I'm told, is modeled after St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, which is to say enormous and elegant and maybe a bit overdone. It takes up an entire city block. I mean, sheesh. The sun came up as we entered the parking lot. I felt the golden rays slice across the morning skies and the sudden subtle shift of forces playing around the world. Dawn is significant. Magically speaking, it's a time of new beginnings. Magic isn't as simple as good as evil, light and dark, but there's a lot of correlations between the powers particular to night and the use of black magic. We drove around to the rear parking of the church and got out of the truck. Michael walked in front of me carrying his bag. I stuffed my hands down in my pockets of my duster as I followed him. I felt uncomfortable approaching the church, not for any weirdo, quasi-mystical reason, just because I never felt comfortable with churches in general. The church had killed a lot of wizards in its day, believing them in league with Satan. It felt strange just to be strolling up on business. "Hi, God, it's me, Harry. Please don't turn me into a pillar of salt." "Harry," Michael said, bringing me out of my reverie. "Look." He had stopped beside a pair of worn old cars parked in the back lot. Someone had done one hell of a job on them. The windows had all been smashed, their safety glass fractured and dented. The hoods were dented as well. The headlights lay mostly on the ground in front of the cars, and all the tires were flat. I walked around to the back of the cars, frowning. The tail lights lay shattered on the ground. The antenna had been torn off each car and were not in sight. Long scratches in three parallels rose round down the sides of both cars. "Well?" Michael asked me. I looked up at him and shrugged. "Probably something got frustrated when it couldn't get inside the church." He snorted. "Do you think?" He adjusted the gym bag until Amarachi's handle lay jutting outside the zipper. "Any chances it's still around?" I shook my head. "I doubt it. Come daylight, ghosts usually head back to the Never Never." "Usually?" "Usually, almost without exception." Michael eyed me and kept one hand on the hill of the sword. We walked up to the delivery door. Compared to the grandeur of the church's front, it looked stunningly modest. On either side of the double doors, someone had gone to a lot of trouble to plant and care for half a dozen rose bushes. Someone else had gone to a lot of trouble to tear them to shreds. Each plant had been uprooted. Thorny branches lay strewn across several dozen square yards around the door. I crouched down beside several fallen branches, picking them up one at a time, squinting at them in the dawn dimness. "What are you looking for?" Michael asked me. "Blood on the thorns," I said. "Rose thorns can poke little holes in just about anything, and something that tore them this hard would have been scratching itself on them." "Any blood?" "No, no footprints on the earth either." Michael nodded. "A ghost, then?" I squinted up at Michael. "I hope not." He tilted his head and frowned at me. I dropped a branch and spread my hands. A ghost can usually only manage to move things physically in bursts. Throwing pots and pans, maybe really stretch things and stack a bunch of books or something. I gestured at the torn plants in the back toward the red cars. "Not only that, but it's limited to a certain place, time, or event. The ghost, if it is one, followed Lydia here and rampaged around and blessed the ground, tearing things apart. I mean, wow. This thing is way stronger than any ghost I've ever heard about." Michael frowned deep. "And what are you saying, Harry?" "I'm saying we might be getting out of our depth here. Look, Michael, I know a lot about spooks and nasties, but they aren't my specialty or anything." He frowned at me. "We might need to know more." I stood up, brushing myself off. "That," I said, "is my specialty. Let's talk to Father Forthill." Michael knocked on the door. It opened once. Father Forthill, a gray man of slight build and only medium stature, blinked anxiously up at us through a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles. His eyes were normally a shade of blue, so bright as to rival robin's eggs, but today they were heavily underlined, shadowed. "Oh," he said. "Oh, Michael, thank the Lord." He opened the door wider, and Michael stepped over the threshold. The two embraced. Forthill kissed Michael on either cheek and stepped back to peer at me. "And Harry Dresden, professional wizard. I have never had anyone ask me to bless a 5-gallon drum into holy water before, Mr. Dresden." Michael peered at me, evidently surprised that the priest and I knew each other. I shrugged, a little embarrassed, and said, "You told me I could count on him at a pinch." "And so you can," Forthill said, his blue eyes sparkling for a moment behind the spectacles. "I trust you have no complaints about the blessed water?" "Oh, none at all," I said. "Talk about your surprised ghouls." "Harry," Michael chided, "you've been keeping secrets again." "Contrary to what Charity thinks, Michael, I don't go running to the phone to call you every time I have a little problem." I clapped Michael on the shoulder in passing and offered my hand to Father Forthill, who shook it gravely. "No hug and kiss on each cheek for me." Forthill smiled up at me. "I look forward to the day when you give your life to God, Mr. Dresden. He can use men with your courage." I tried to smile, but it probably looked a little sickly. Look, Father, I'd love to talk about it with you sometime, but we're here for a reason. Indeed, Forthill said. The sparkle in his eyes faded, and his manner became absolutely serious. He began to walk down a clean hallway with dark, heavy beams of old wood overhanging it, and paintings of the saints on the walls. We kept pace with him. The young woman arrived yesterday just before sunset. Was she all right? I asked. He lifted both eyebrows. All right, I should say not. All the signs of an abused personality, borderline malnutrition. She had low-grade fever as well and hadn't bathed recently. She looked as though she might be going through withdrawal from something. I frowned. Yeah, she looks like she's in pretty bad shape. I briefly recounted my conversation with Lydia and my decision to help her. Father Forhill shook his head. I provided fresh clothes and a meal for her and was getting set to put her to bed on the spare cot at the back of the rectory. That's when it happened. What happened? She began to shake, Forthill said. Her eyes rolled back in her head. She was still sitting at the dinner table and spilled her soup onto the floor. I thought she was having a seizure of some sort and tried to hold her down to get something into her mouth to keep her from biting her tongue. He sighed, clasping his hands behind his back as he walked. I'm afraid that I was of little help to the poor child. The fit seemed to pass in a few moments, but she still trembled and had gone absolutely pale. Cassandra's tears, I said, or narcotic withdrawal, Forthill said. Either way, she needed help. I moved her to the cot. She begged me not to leave her, so I sat down and began to read part of St. Matthew's Gospel to her. She seemed to calm somewhat, but she had a look in her eyes. The old priest sighed. That resolved look that they get when they're sure that they're lost, despairing, and one so young. When did the attack begin? I asked. About 10 minutes later, the priest said. It started. The most terrible howling of wind, Lord preserve me, but I was sure the windows would rattle out of their frames. Then we started to hear sounds outside. He swallowed. Terrible sounds, something walking back and forth, heavy footsteps, and then started calling her name. The priest folded his arms and rubbed his palms against each arm. I rose and addressed the being and asked its name, but it only laughed at me. I began to compel it by the holy word, and it went quite mad. We could hear it crushing things outside. I don't mind telling you that it was quite the most terrifying experience I've ever had in my life. The girl tried to leave to go out to it. She said that she didn't want me harming myself, and that it would only find her in any case. Well, I forbade her, of course, and refused to let her pass me. It kept on outside, and I kept on reading the word aloud to the girl. It waited outside. I could feel it, but could see nothing outside the window. Such a darkness, and every so often it would destroy something else, and we'd hear the sound of it. After several hours, it seemed to grow quiet. The girl went to sleep, and I walked the halls to make sure all the doors and windows were still closed. And when I came back, she was gone. Gone, I asked. Gone as in left, or as in just gone? Forthill gave me a smile and looked a bit shaky. The back door was unlocked, though she had shut it after herself. The old man shook his head. I called Michael at once, of course. We've got to find that girl, I said. Forthill shook his head, his expression grave. Mr. Dresden, I am certain that only the power of the Almighty kept us safe within these walls last night. I won't argue with you, Father. But if you could have sensed this creature's anger, its rage, Mr. Dresden, I would not wish this encounter. I would not wish to encounter this being outside of a church without seeking God's help in the matter. I jerked a thumb at Michael. I did seek God's help. Heck, is one night of the cross not enough? I could always put out the bat signal for the other two. Forthill smiled. That's not what I meant, and you know it, but as you wish. You must come to your own decision. He turned to Michael and me both and said, I hope, gentlemen, that I can trust your discretion on this matter. The police report would doubtlessly reflect that persons unknown perpetuated the vandalism. I snorted. A little white lie, Father. I felt bad the minute I said it, but heck, I get tired of the conversion efforts every time I show up. Evil gains power from fear, Mr. Dresden, Forthill replied. Within the church we have agencies for dealing with these matters. He put a hand on Michael's shoulders briefly, but spreading word of it to everyone, even to all the brethren, would accomplish nothing but to frighten many people and to make the enemy much more able to do harm. I nodded at the priest. I like that attitude, Father. You almost sound like a wizard. His eyebrows shot up, then he broke into a quiet, weary laugh. Be careful, both of you, and may God go with you. He made the sign of the cross over both of us, and I felt a quiet stirring of power, just as I sometimes did around Michael. Faith. Michael and Forthill exchanged a few quiet words about Michael's family while I lurked in the background. Forthill arranged to christen the new baby whenever Charity delivered. They exchanged hugs again. Forthill shook my hand, businesslike and friendly, and we left. Outside, Michael watched me as we went back to his truck. Well, I asked, what's next? I frowned and stuffed my hands into my pockets. The sun was higher now, painting the sky blue, the clouds white. I know someone who's pretty close to the spooks around here. That's psychic in Old Town. Michael scowled and spat. The necromancer. I snorted. He's no necromancer. He can barely call up a ghost and talk to it. He's got to fake it most of the time. Besides, had he been a real necromancer, the White Council would have already hounded him down and beheaded him. Doubtless the man was thinking The man I was thinking of had already been visited by at least one warden and warned of the consequences of dabbling too much in the dark arts. If he's so inept, why speak to him at all? He's probably closer to the spirit world than anyone else in town, other than me, I mean. I'll send Bob out, too, and see what kind of information he can run down. We're bound to have different contacts. Michael frowned at me. I don't trust this business of communing with spirits, Harry. Father Forhill and the others knew about this familiar of yours. Bob isn't a familiar, I shot back. He performs the same function, doesn't he? I snorted. Familiars work for free. I've got to pay Bob. Pay him? He asked, his tone suspicious. Pay what? Mostly romance novels. Sometimes I splurge on a... Michael looked pained. Harry, I really don't want to know. Is there some way that you could work some kind of spell here instead of relying upon these unholy beings? I sighed and shook my head. Sorry, Michael. If it was a demon, it would have left footprints and maybe some kind of psychic trail I could follow. But I'm pretty sure this was pure spirit and a goddamn strong one. Harry, Michael said, voice stern. Sorry, I forgot. Ghosts don't usually inhabit a magical body. They're just energy. They don't leave any physical traces behind, at least none that last for hours at a time. If it was here, I could tell you all kinds of things about it, probably, and work magic on it directly, but it's not here, so... Michael sighed. Very well. I will put out the word to those I know to be on the lookout for the girl, Lydia, you said her name was. Yeah. I described her to Michael, and she has a charm on her wrist, the one I've been wearing the past few nights. Would it protect her, Michael asked. I shrugged. From something as mean as this thing sounded, I don't know. We've got to find out who this ghost was when it was alive and shut it down. Which still will not tell us who or what is stirring up the spirits of the city. Michael unlocked his truck and got inside. That's what I like about you, Michael. You're always thinking so positively. He grinned at me. Faith, Harry. God has a way of seeing to it that things all fall into place. He started driving. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. First off to see the psychic, then to send Bob out to find out more about what looked to be the most dangerous ghost I've seen in a long time, and then to keep on looking for who it was behind the spooky goings-on and rap them politely on the head until they stopped. Easy one as 1, 2, 3. Sure. I whimpered and sunk down in my seat a little more and wished I'd kept my aching sore self in bed. All right. Give me one moment. I am just... I'm resuming glasses onto my face since we are coming to a close. Yes, we have actually been reading for a little over 2 hours. So unfortunately, story time is coming to an end. Because we didn't geek yet. Oh my goodness. Let me turn my light off and things. I always close this with a little bit of a flourish. So that is part 1 of Grave Peril. We're currently at chapter 10. We will continue this next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Hopefully I will provide this on Wednesday of next week. I'll have to check my schedule. I hope you enjoyed listening to the story. It is opening up so far. We're going to be shifting gears to Midnight Suns here in just a moment. And by the end of this week, at least all the Halloween stuff will be up on YouTube. So for you guys who might have missed it, or only heard part of it, or didn't have a chance to listen, or didn't have a chance to catch all of it, it'll be up there for your listening pleasure. Watching, however you want to put it. Because there's really not a whole lot to watch about this whole situation. But anyway, guys, that is going to be it for Storytime with Sin for yet another week. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to take a brief break as I shift gears into the game. And we'll be right back after these clips. Catching just a few. Or as I used to say in the old game show, 2 and 2.